think we're up. Yep.
You clicked both
We're
buttons
up.
now, Andy.
Yeah, I clicked both buttons. We're up. Yeah. The problem is I've worked out what it is. At 9:30, I get this message popping up saying I'm getting up in however many hours it is. And it pops up in exactly the same spot or just beneath where it says start broadcast or now end broadcast. So I may have to work out how to turn that off. But I can't remember how I turned it on because yeah.
It's bad.
It's going to be one of those days.
You're getting up in X number of hours.
Yeah, especially if I'm on holiday. Yeah. I don't know why, because, especially I'm on vacation holiday, and even apart from that, it's the school summer holidays. So,
yeah,
why any alarms at all? I shouldn't have that. It should know that I'm not needing an alarm. Yeah, especially if I have a dog that wakes me up. Yeah. Sleep until 7. Look, when did the last time that happened? I don't know.
Sounds luxurious.
Yeah, I was going to say, the last time I was asleep at 7 o'clock, I think that was probably when I had COVID. Yeah, I was ill.
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing about that. That was awful.
No, it is. Yeah, we should avoid that.
Andy sleeping until 7 is miraculous in itself.
Yeah.
Even if it did take that to knock him down.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I don't sleep. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I was asleep at 7 o'clock. Even if I kind of intend to turn the alarms off, I'll wake up before then. If I stay in bed and pretend to go back to sleep, I'll still.
Because I tend to do that during the week, but then I get to the weekend and I'll usually have one of the weekend days. I'll try and sleep in a little bit, and I managed to wake up at sort of 7:30ish. So I'll just close my eyes for 10 minutes, and then it's like an hour and a half later. How did that happen?
Yeah.
Oh, that happens in the afternoon sometimes. Every now and again, I'll kind of, if I get the chance to actually sit down undisturbed without something to do in an afternoon, particularly if it's been a long day already.
It's the demands on your time, isn't it, rather than you actively wanting to do something. Yeah.
And then you just kind of like, oh, I thought that was only 10 minutes, wasn't it? Oh, no, it was an hour and a half.
Why is it dark out?
Yeah. Normally somebody going, what's for dinner?
Oh, yeah. I'll just, lay down. I'll never fall asleep. That's the thing, is I'll just lay down and maybe I'll get on social media and I'm like, oh, it'll be 5 minutes. And then a half hour later, I'm like, oh, whoops. And then my kid comes in. What are we having for dinner? Oh, yeah, that usually snaps me back to reality, unfortunately.
Oh, I've got to do all the other things again.
Mm-hmm.
I think there'll be some interesting kind of psychology into kind of sort of time dilation from kind of social media. The suck from that, isn't it? Is like
it's the gravity.
Yeah, I've only been on Instagram for 5 minutes. Yeah, but it seems like clocks have got accelerated an hour. Yeah.
I mean, the only other time that happens to me is when I'm actually doing something productive and all my focus is on my jewelry work, metal work, or painting or drawing. Like it's like I'll just kind of blink and I'll look and I'm like, oh, an hour, 2 hours went by and it only feels like 10 minutes. And those are the times I feel good about. Like that's good.
Get in the flow.
Yeah.
It's when your body kind of brings you back to reality and goes, when did I last drink something?
Oh, I've had that too, where I've spent hours in the workshop and I'm like, I haven't eaten. No wonder I start getting a little angry or hangry kind of thing. And
it's dangerous though, especially with power tools, isn't it? When you start getting to the point of shakes.
Well, and I guess average temperature, because you're in Texas, aren't you? So
yes.
Average temperature out there is stupidly high compared to probably what we're used to over here in the UK.
Yeah, right now at the moment, I don't think our low gets. I think. Let me look at my converter here. Our low is about 26 degrees Celsius.
Nope. That's
And
too high.
and then and today right now it's 33. So 34. No, but it feels like 39. Yeah. So
No.
this is why
Oh.
I'm here right now, not in my shop.
Ah.
So
I could not function.
it really
No.
does take away a lot of motivation to be in the shop for very long. So
I've got AC, which is quite unusual for being in the UK.
mhm,
But because this is like my office with a lot of IT kit and stuff as well, so I sort of need it. And
mhm.
for me, I was really sort of going slow and sluggish and not quite with it before, and it was saying 27 on my thermometer, and yeah, that was aircon on, and sort of back to normality then for me, you know. But 26 as a low that's painful for me. That.
Yeah, I can't function in those sort of temperatures. Really can't. So not in the UK. It's like I went
Very
to
humidity as well.
I went to the south of France in '96. I want to say '96. Down to the Mediterranean in the summer, and I knew it was going to be kind of mid-30s Celsius, and I thought, oh, I'm going to die doing down there. But went with a bunch of mates and we went down there, and it just felt different. If it had been in the UK, I would have had heat stroke. We were drinking. I was making sure I drank a lot of water during the day, and actually we were drinking a lot of beer in the day as well, and in the evening. So I think it's probably good hydration was probably the key.
It is. It definitely helps. It helps your mind be alert. That's one thing I made a mistake last time a while ago when I was foraging, and I didn't drink near enough, and I had a heat stroke, and so it just makes you extra sensitive to the heat and everything. So anytime when it's really hot, you just gotta hydrate, and it helps you can even tell a difference, like your thought processes come faster. You're not as sluggish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definite merit to that. I'm generally chronically dehydrated, so I just forget that I need to drink stuff. But I've had that before, where I've been for blood tests, and then that evening or that afternoon had the doctor ring me up to sort of remind me that I need to drink stuff, because although they're checking for something else, they've noticed that there was sodium levels were a bit high there, Jenny.
Oh, yeah.
A bit short on the plasma.
Yeah. We just had to cut slices of the blood out because it wasn't wasn't liquid there.
Oh gosh.
Redsmith commented in the chat. It's 42 degrees Celsius in the sun where he is today in France.
That's what, 110, 115 in Fahrenheit. That's
rough.
That ish. Yeah, that's
hotter than Texas right now. Actually, no, I shouldn't say that. Hotter than Houston.
I was going to say Texas is a pretty big place, isn't it?
Yes, you can drive 24 hours and still be in our state. So
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I've never been out to the States. I'd like to go one day, because now I've got since kind of finding the maker community, I've seemed to have an awful lot of American friends, and I'd love to come out and visit, and I will at some point, I hope.
It's the opposite for me. I have a lot of UK and European friends, and they ask me, when are you coming to Maker Central?
Yeah, it's easy to come and visit us as well, because we can pretty much be anywhere within about 6 hours.
Yeah. I'm actually very jealous of how easy, I mean, well, I shouldn't say easy, but the time it takes to get to places there.
Well, you say that. I mean, I'm still on holiday. Dale asked whether I'd managed to turn the Tinkerage into the TARDIS, whether I'd mastered that. For the benefit of those watching who are wondering why there's suddenly this huge workshop behind me, the place that I'm staying at on vacation, I had to, for the benefit of the owner's electricity bill and potentially a fire, they had a security light that wasn't going out. A big old halogen one. So I had to kind of contact them and say, this thing's very, very hot and it's burning you a lot of electricity and it's not going out. It's been on for like 24 hours plus. How do I turn it off? So they kind of said, we've got the key to the garage is hidden. You can find it here, and it'll be one of the switches. Well, it wasn't one of the switches, but I found out where. Basically, had to climb around, and luckily, I know about electricity and making and things like that. So I found out where it was, and turned it off. So hopefully, stopped their garage from burning down. But I thought I would take advantage of the knowing where that key was and the workspace in order to be in here this evening and not disturb the rest of my family.
Be able to do that and
perhaps
not
a bit
touch the
later.
wall.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, just one corner of this. I think this must be at least, I'm thinking 6 times bigger than the Tinkerage. So I'm a little bit jealous. And there's even for those watching, they may be able to see a black bar above my head there. That is an I-beam, and out of shot of the camera, there's a little trolley. So actually, it's got this kind of beam going across the garage, which I would have thought probably has a good working load of a couple of 100 kilos. So that's a nice little bit. I've taken a photograph of that. I kind of think one day, yeah, it's a bit high for me at the moment, I think. One day maybe I'll have something like that in a workshop that is bigger than the Tinkerage. But it took us, yeah. But it took it. I could have one in the leg. I could have one in the Tinkerage. It would be kind of pointless because I can touch the ceiling. But it took nearly an entire day to drive here from our home, about 250 miles away.
Is that
it should be easier.
A work day or a 24-hour?
Yeah, that's a work day, I suppose. It's not the 24-hour because I could have been anywhere else. But it should be easier going back because we're not going back. We've only got a couple more days left, and we're going back on a day that's not the normal changeover day. So roads should not be chock-a-block. It's
fingers crossed.
Especially out coming down in the southwest, and the roads get really. There's not many big roads, and they get full up. People coming down from London and the Midlands, and traffic slows down. Yeah. Well, yeah. Better thing. Hey, we should get more into making, shouldn't we? Because we can just waffle about things.
Yeah. Do we just do our usual, waffle for an hour or so, and then maybe introduce the guest, or I know it's
becoming a bit of a tradition.
It is.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself, Lindsay, or shall we introduce you?
I'm curious what you guys would say about me. I don't really care for talking about myself. So you can.
Well, I think you're obviously you're Lindsay Creative on Instagram, which I think is your main kind of place to hang out, isn't it? I don't think you hang out anywhere else. Occasionally at Discord. You have your own Discord server that you started.
Yeah, I'm on Discord a little bit, but I'm really bad about getting on. I was on Discord before our Maker Movement group, because our local makerspace started one, and Creator Space Discord group, and I'm terrible at going on that one. So I gave you guys that warning, so I'm just just saying that. And then I'm on a few Facebook groups, but I don't friend anybody on Facebook because it's just more of a privacy thing, unless you want to see pictures of my kids all the time. But
parents' prerogative.
Yeah, kind of family. So I would say that you're I would call you an artist, and I would say that you're an artist that specialises in jewellery and metal work, but you also draw. You do some excellent drawings I've seen. You're a bit of a geek as well, because sometimes your making is influenced by some of the sort of popular culture of the day. Kind of seen a few things like that. I think you're exceedingly creative.
And an actor as well.
Oh yeah.
Voice actor.
Yeah. Voice actor. That was a new thing for me to do.
Me too.
Yes, for the benefit of those who aren't quite sure what that is.
Yes.
That would be
Lindsay and I are both part of, or would both play certain characters in Dark Star 1, the audio extravaganza from a future guest. Hopefully tell us a bit more about that.
That's
Phil
been a really
Thompson.
fun thing.
So, and of course, what many people will know, there's a few people saying, you're not going to talk about this, are you? You're not going to mention this, are you? But you used to work for NASA because you are an engineer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually, I mean,
engineers.
yeah, I got my degree in mechanical engineering, and but I also had a lot of other jobs before NASA as well. So all sorts of oddball jobs that worked for
Similar sort of work. Obviously, NASA, their job is generally getting things into space or studying things in space. But I mean, were the other jobs that you had prior to NASA, were they
still mechanical engineering?
Mechanical engineering, but were they kind of related in terms of the things you kind of did? Materials testing?
Well, actually, so it was materials testing. I did have a graduate. In my undergrad, I worked for a professor, and I got paid and everything, and we studied osteoporosis in bones. Wow. And he was a mechanical engineering professor, and he decided we would do material testing on bones. So we did studies on rats with different things. So we did a study on alcoholism, and so I remember around Christmas, for like a whole semester, I'd like go to the lab and get rats drunk on this side and the other side. You have a control group.
Fantastic.
The drunk rats were so mean. They bit. I hated them. Just saying. They got drunk all the time, every day. You'd think they'd be really chill, but they were mean drunks. Rats are mean.
Did you have to get them after a couple of hours after all the drinks? Did you have to get them some like really greasy fried foods and stuff just to help calm them down and things?
We fed them beans and eggs and all that stuff. No. So I think for like the Christmas holiday, we had to harvest the bones and all that stuff, and that was like probably the weirdest job I had.
That sounds like a really very interesting thing to do, though. From sort of the engineering, the science side of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about some material testing you do is like compression tests. So you figure out the elastic modulus of material, and you'll look, if you open up any sort of materials book of steel, of like any kind of polymer or anything, you have your elastic modulus. You can see how much compression it can take before it fails, or you can see how much tensile load. And so we did compression tests on that, and just to compare like a control group to the alcohol group, we definitely saw a trend. So it was interesting.
Is there much elastic deformation in bone then before it goes to what I'm assuming is then more of a plastic deformation? Or a fracture?
More fracture than plastic.
Oh.
Well, it depends on what you do. If you do a 3-point bend test, it's like, if you have
I suppose that's what I'm picturing.
But this is kind of graphic. Do we want to get graphic here? But if you have like, say, a femur bone and you slice it this way, you're going to see on the inside, you're going to see your spongy bone on the inside, and then you see you have your cortical bone and your cancellous bone. And the cortical bone, I think, is the harder bone. We would study the spongy material on the inside, because if you think about it, if you were suffering bone loss, that's what you see first. So that has more surface area, and so if you are undergoing osteoporosis, you're going to see bone loss there first before the outer shell goes. If you want to not suffer from osteoporosis, don't get. There's a lot of things you should do.
Don't drink every day and hang around a bunch of material scientists.
Yeah. So anyway, but we did that, and so you don't really see the failure, because when you're testing it, you're only testing the inside and you have the outer side. So you don't really.
I suppose it's going to be a sheer failure anyway, isn't it? Really.
But it's a compression test. You see it more with the deformation on your plot rather than anything else. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going off into. Well, I'm waffling now.
I was going to say, I'm fascinated by that. My degree is physics, but I specialised in materials.
Oh, okay.
That was the thing that I was really fascinated in. And I worked in the materials industry before going into a variety of materials, before going into teaching. But I had a place at the end of my degree. I had a place on a biomedical engineering course, master's course, but I couldn't get enough funding, and I didn't want to go into debt at the time. So I passed on that place. Yeah. So this is kind of fascinating stuff for me. But
same for me. I
can appreciate
cybernetics.
Yeah.
I think I would have loved to do a focus into biomedical research. Like that stuff was really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But at the time, I just never. Like jobs weren't available at the time. I mean, those are really hard to come by. And like when I was looking for work, there wasn't much available. So it was either the government or the government. And it was, you could work for, you could make bombs and blow people up or work for NASA. That was my option at the time. I don't want to make bombs. So.
Yeah. And who doesn't want to work for NASA? But let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. Mechanical engineering, and this is something we may end up talking to you again at some point. We already have for the benefit of the audience. You have already agreed that you're going to come on to our chat, which is going to include Ruth, Ali, and Billy, hopefully, and talk about how women in the maker space and how men can do a better job of helping you out, and not just women, but sort of non-binary and other type of folk. And so we'll have a chat about that. But as many people know, obviously from my science background, my education background, I'm the STEM, the whole sort of science, technology, engineering, maths agenda is something that I'm very, very interested in, and even now, even though I'm no longer kind of professionally in that arena, and I think people like yourself and Ruth, I want to talk to you about this, because there's obviously issues as getting more people involved in STEM, and we've got to think about where in STEM that is. But of course, the big issue is getting more females in as well, because often have much higher levels of creativity, and for many generations, we've been missing out on this super intelligent half of the population for a whole number of reasons, which are just mostly rubbish. But so meeting a female mechanical engineer, I mean, certainly as a Brit who's been involved in engineering and science from an education point of view, and obviously a degree, you are rare. Female mechanical engineers in the UK, there are not many. I mean, obviously you're in the States. I don't know if it's different in the States, but how did you get into mechanical engineering? What's the story there?
It's sort of, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I graduated from high school, but which I don't. So high school is when you're about 17, 18 years old. And I had two very amazing physics teachers that the way they taught physics was not at all boring. It was very intriguing to me. It answered a lot of questions I had, like why questions, like why does this happen? Why does this happen? It sort of kind of gave meaning to the universe around me. So that intrigued me, but then I also had some interest in math as well, and I really like creating things and designing things, and so I think I took like an interest test to see where I could go, and told me it could do. So I have there's a thunderstorm going on, so if you hear anything, I apologize. We have very loud thunderstorms here. So, so there was this interest test, and it told like you just kind of fill it out, and it tests what you are good at and what you're intrigued by and curious about, and then it kind of says a couple things like, oh, you might be this, and you might. And so one of them was engineering, and then another one was you could be a really good librarian. or a museum curator was another one. And so I just
I mean, I suppose they're quite divergent in some respects, but not that divergent in others, I suppose.
I mean, I guess the being detail oriented, I could see kind of containing all three, which is weird because I don't consider myself to be that detailed oriented person, but maybe I was back then. I feel like I've changed a lot since then. So I kind of went just mechanical engineering because I felt like it was more of a universal umbrella. So I felt like if I did mechanical engineering, I could decide what I want to do later on in life, and it would give me more freedom. Like, to me, I took mechanical engineering as an idea of freedom, of I wouldn't be pigeonholed into something small.
Yeah, it's quite a diverse course, as I understand it. I work with quite a few mechanical engineers, and the diversity of things that you study it's not just vehicles or engines or stuff like that. There's, I work with guys who are designing ventilation systems or things like that. That it seems to be a much broader topic than something like electrical engineering, for instance, or any of the sort of standard branches of engineering that people study.
Exactly. So you know a lot of lots of things, but you don't know it in depth. Like
I suppose you'd get an idea of what you want to study more of, I suppose.
Yeah. So that's kind of what it was okay, you do a little bit of electromechanical work, and then you do a little bit of thermodynamics, and then you go into heat transfer, and then you go into design. Like you go and have a focus of like design, and that was the main one. Is so you take all these random courses that seem to have no. I mean, you could look at the physics and calculus, and that's the basis for everything. And then you can go and look at all these things like material science and all these things. And then at the end of our coursework, we do a major design project. And you take all the little things that you know that you don't know a whole lot about, but you know all these little things. And they would bring in major corporations, and they would give us projects to work on. And so for my undergrad, I worked for a little company, and we did some sort of more green, environmentally friendly way of analyzing density of fracking fluid, which is not very environmentally friendly. So the irony.
Yeah.
Making this slightly bad thing slightly less bad.
Well, I think it was like their non-green method was some like radioactive stuff. And some of the European countries were like, no, you can't bring that into our country. And so we had to design a method to analyze the density of the fluid going through. And we used sort of like sound waves and reflection, and then analyzing the change in density that way.
Cool.
That's a cool solution, actually.
Yeah. And then I think my graduate work, which I thought was more fun, was Ford came by and they were like, hey, this project, we are having issues with our chassis for the Ford Mustang. At a certain frequency, it's having a certain problem with resonance. Could you get rid of that? And so we would design it in our 3D modeling program and all that. And we actually, and this was before, this is how old I am. This is before 3D printers. 3D printers had just come out, but we used it was like a cornstarch thing that would print out in cornstarch, and it would cross-link, and you would have your model from that. And it was like a really big deal.
Cool.
It's like such a big deal at the time.
What software were you modeling in, if you don't mind?
Let's see. We had two different. We were using SolidWorks and we were using Pro Engineer.
Yeah, I thought you might have said pro engineer.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the two things. So that was a fun project. I really like that one.
Yeah, it
So-
sounds like a fun challenge, taking resonances out of something, especially I suppose because the a lot of card development now is going to like monocoque constructions and stuff like that as well, sort of taking as a solution for taking resonances out and stuff.
Yeah.
I suppose something like Ford for the Mustang, it would have to still be, sort of like more of an old school chassis as well. So that sounds like a project I'd probably want to have a go at myself.
Yeah, that was a fun one to work on. And I see the connection even now as I make things. Like those sorts of projects I worked on back then, I still use some of those ideas and concepts that I use now, just with even like silver work or my
Of
metal
course,
work.
yeah.
And that's something I really want to kind of connect to. I mentioned to you when we were chatting earlier in the week. I think it was this week. Ruth Amos's podcast, which name is I've forgotten the name of it. I've forgotten the name for the podcast. Jamie, you got multiple screens. Look up Ruth's podcast. They made it. Brilliant. Yeah. She was interviewing a jewelry designer who was talking about how she applies, and we'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. She applied sort of engineering principles. So rather than just doing kind of standard bench work, jewelers is the backbone of jewel making here. You kind of on the bench, on high level bench with the coping saws and all the rest. He actually applies Fusion and Blender and some of these other sort of 3D modeling programs, and he's looking at it from a much more engineering base. I found it quite fascinating, and it was nice to hear the previous guests had been what you might call traditional engineers, or were involved in traditional engineering, and to suddenly go to somebody that's actually in a very creative and art rather a craft rather than engineering. Although having done jewelry myself, I know that there's an awful lot of engineering processes involved, but it's not what it's considered. And I instantly kind of thought, this is something that, because I know you make jewelry, you do a lot of work with metals that's not necessarily pieces for jewelry, but it's very similar techniques. You're working with copper, you're joining different materials together, you're cutting, you're bending, you're designing, you're anodizing, all sorts of different things. And I want to dive into this kind of where science and engineering meets art and craft.
It's bringing the A into the stem, isn't it, and making it steam. That's that kind of that blend of the two, isn't it?
And that's potentially another topic for another time, because there are some within the STEM agenda kind of environment educationists who go, no A, we're not having A because that's art, and there's enough for art already. And there are some people who are going, and there are some that are saying, well, no, we need that.
Well, I do think the feeling's mutual on the art side as well.
Yeah,
Because I took a lot of art in high school, and to do any sort of math was for some of the students, I think a lot of times you find your identity in art, and it's like, if you're good in this, you're not good in this, or something like that, which was a ridiculous thing to say or to believe about yourself, because I feel like you can work towards something and improve in it. And math is no different. You just maybe have not talked to yourself in a way that you can understand it yet, and it just needs to be explained to you in a different way. I feel like a lot of that's true for any kind of field subject matter, because there's been times when I'm like, it is not clicking. Like a lot of chemistry was like that for me, and it was not clicking, and then all of a sudden it just then it made sense, and maybe my brain needed to go in different routes to finally understand that concept too. if that makes any sense. But I feel like, and my mom is an art teacher, and so she really was good at taking ideas outside of the traditional idea of art and making it a I don't like saying this, but I can't think of a better word, a holistic sort of way of experiencing and creating art. She would take history, and I know this is a little not necessarily the math and science, but she would have her students, when they were having to mat and frame their work, she would have them measure, use a ruler. I mean, these are things that I think we should all learn, and this is part of math and engineering is measuring.
Absolutely,
and she would teach them how to measure, which is in middle school, which is you're about 13 years old. A lot of them they never had that experience of measuring something before with a ruler, or they did it in first, when they were maybe 6 or 7 years old, but then they never used that skill again and they forgot it. So she would teach them how to measure, how to calculate the amount of mat they need to cut or the frame, and just basic skills like that. And then perspective. You would see this a lot in the Renaissance period, where they would you would see the combination of math and science and perspective, and you have a focal point. And then as things get larger and larger, and so they would use these methods, and I just thought that was really cool. And so she would have her students do that as well.
I suppose, like, talking of like Renaissance as well. I mean, Da Vinci was an artist, and an engineer.
Yeah, polymath. Yeah,
and he would not. I don't think he considered himself an artist at all.
No, of course he didn't.
I think he was quoted saying he was a man who created weapons. Something like that, and he doesn't create art, which is kind of funny. Or he considered himself a person of science and things like that.
Definitely, yeah.
But he was definitely an artist, but he didn't identify that as that. Which, and that's another topic you could get into. Is someone an artist if they claim they're an artist, or are they an artist?
Or the other way around, is someone an artist when someone else calls them an artist?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the point where they become an artist, when someone tells them they're creating art.
Yeah, like they acknowledge their work is art. The acknowledgement of the work that is created art or not. That's really good.
That's something I've struggled with this year, doing picking up my pencil and drawing for the first time at the end of last year. Becoming Andy the artist. Inktober. Yeah, I mean, my back, up to the age of kind of 13, 14, I was good at everything apart from PE. Sport was not my thing at all. Then, late teens through to, the last, up to last, no, I wouldn't say last year. I was science was my thing. Yes, I did DIY, and yes, I fit into kind of what now describes as the sort of maker thing, because I made stuff. But actually picking up a pencil and actively drawing, was something I hadn't done since I was 13. And picking it up again at the age of 50, and sort of doing, I mean, one of the hashtags I use is art every day. But I struggle with that idea that I might be an artist. I struggle with that. I
wonder if that's your science background, though, telling you that you can't be an artist because you're a scientist.
Well, and there's that whole, with that kind of, when Lindsay, you first mentioned that a little while ago about that kind of idea of that separation between them. We get this whole sort of thing it happens in education and the everyday world. People go, I'm left-brained. I'm logical and I'm right-brained. I'm creative and arty, and never the twain shall meet. And I mean that to some certain extent that's a model. It's not necessarily from a neuroscientific point of view. It's not necessarily correct as with a lot of other things. And but we do that, don't we? We do kind of say, left brain person, right brain person. And for a while in the early noughties, the late 90s and early noughties in education, we were starting to try and kind of go, oh, that's a left brain type student, and that's a right brain type student, and then there was all kind of, oh, they're a kinesthetic learner, they're an auditory learner, and
which has also since been disproven as well.
Yes.
Learning types.
Yes, but we still kind of go, oh, I learn by doing. And we still say that. We still find people to do that. Oh, when I get a new machine, I don't bother with the instructions. I actually just start pulling it apart and seeing what we'll do. And I think we kind of label. We've got these labels that have been put on almost by society, and we kind of go, I'm Andy. I'm an ex-physics teacher. I'm a scientist. I was a science geek. I'm not an artist, but actually. I could be.
Yeah,
I could be.
Well, I mean,
why shouldn't I be?
This is the topic, though, isn't it? Is whether or not maybe if you're doing a physics calculation, at that point you are a physicist. If you are doing a drawing based on that physics calculation, you're an artist. You're doing art. Maybe your societal labels change depending on what you're doing. So as your the cassette tape, Lindsay, we did recently. That is engineering and art.
Yeah,
it's doing metalwork to make art.
Right.
But
I think that as far as kind of looking over the idea of I feel like identity is a little different than what you draw from. Your subject matter. Does that make sense? So you could be an engineer, but you could have how do I say it? I think you can be a better engineer if you allow other ideas and concepts to come in besides strictly science and math. So if you look at art or listen to music or different sorts of things to open yourself up to different things, that would influence your engineering.
Totally agree. Yeah.
So with the cassette thing, because I have that knowledge of engineering, or at least not even that. I mean, obviously you don't need a degree in engineering to be good at soldering or good at making that cassette. Or not that I was very good at it, but I did. I wanted to show you guys the process and how I did things and the way my mind works and how to solve problems. And I think I learned a lot we're all problem solvers in our own way. Engineering, when I did study engineering, that problem solving is used a lot. So you become a very good problem solver in looking at the problem, seeing your needs, addressing what are the needs and then your wants, and boiling everything down, getting rid of all the extra waste and seeing your problems that you can come up against, like your problems with your materials, problems the physics behind things or the chemistry behind things, your heat transfer and all these other things, and being able to analyze all that to finally come to a solution based on all those other things.
But it's sort of sculpting a way of thinking, isn't it? And sculpting a way of processing the world by teaching or learning something like engineering or learning something like, I suppose, sculpture as a thing it's to sound cliche, it's engineering a specific type of thought in that person. And if you've got something like engineering, like you say, you're learning how to problem solve and apply specific tool sets to a situation or to a problem. And I suppose that there is a lot of transferable skills and a lot of overlap in a lot of subjects that you could pick up skills, similar problem solving skills by learning mechanical engineering or learning maths or learning something like sculpture.
Right.
It's that Venn diagram of skills and learning, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm still learning different techniques and learning ways to do things better. And I think that's part of the processes of learning new techniques and then somehow incorporating those and improving your overall process. I feel like that's another thing is efficiency. Like that's a huge thing in engineering is how to make your processes more efficient. And as someone who's making like one-offs and everything, I'm like, that is a huge, like, it is
everything's a prototype, isn't it?
Yes, everything's a prototype. And then so I'm thinking, how can I improve on this if I make it next time? And I have this year especially started making jigs or certain things to help the processes move faster. I'm still not there yet. I don't think I'll ever be. But because of my engineering background, I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, this is so inefficient. I got to be doing this a lot better.
Yeah, and you always think of the best way you could have done the thing you've just done when you're on the next step. Yes. Hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it?
But I think that's good, though. I think, to be able to like look back and see ways to improve on something is such a good skill to have. I'm not saying I have that skill. Sometimes I think back and, I could improve it this way. And sometimes I'll just, I don't know any other way. I guess I'll just do it again. And, or it's just having that time to research something and make it better is where I would like to spend my time, but I don't always have that time.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like you said, with that kind of time constraint or maybe not constraint, but that potential internal pressure to feel like you need to progress something. I know, like I find myself doing it sometimes where I can't think of a more efficient way to do the next step, so I either just don't end up doing it and the project just gets shelved and I move on to something else, or I think, well, I'll have to do this and I'll have to remake it when I've thought of a better solution. Or, I suppose you just end up with a second prototype then.
No, that happens a lot to me where I think actually my last project I did for the Maker chess set that Dead Rise Woodcraft is doing. I don't know if you guys seen that. I started out, and I don't know if you were seeing my stories. I only did a couple of stories on it. I didn't do any posts on it just because it was so prototypey. It wasn't a final piece that I was given a bunch of silverware, like from Ben Makes KC. I think he's in Kansas City. He had a bunch of silverware. He's like, hey, anyone want some? I was like, yes, please. Because this sounds exciting. And I thought it was silver-plated brass. And so I'm like, I'll take this fork and I think I'll make it into a knight. I think this would be cool. I have some ideas. And so I start cutting through it. Lo and behold, it's solid silver. I'm like, okay.
What do you think?
And I'm like, oh no. But
now, was that a disappointment or was that a nice new challenge?
It was both. It was a challenge. Like, I really like challenges because I get bored very easily doing the same thing over and over again. I could really relate with Geeky Faye on their wanting to do something different all the time because I'm the same way. And so that's also been a challenge for me to make the same thing over and over again for people who want them. So I tried to...
Ali had quite a few things like that sort of hit home for quite a few people as well.
I tried, actually, so this is what I do to make it a little bit interesting, is I might change it up just a little bit to make it a little... So this a person ordered an envelope and letter from me. And I'm like, you know what? I want to make this smaller. I want to make it daintier. And going smaller is not always easier. It is harder. And this one was so difficult. And so it was a challenge. So anyway, going back. See, I start rabbit trailing. So back to
perfect for the waffle.
Back to the solid silver knight. What happened was, I think because it had been already forged into a silverware, it was a cat just emerged.
The wildcat appeared.
I didn't know she was there. That's Frida the shop cat. At least it's not Ghost. Oh, okay. Anyway.
It's because you mentioned Ali, because I think Ali's cat appear?
Yeah, Ali's cat.
Yeah.
You busted open that door. Okay. Sorry, I'm continue laughing. Yeah, so the silverware, I think it was already drop forged, and so it was already pretty hard. And I tried annealing it, and I think I over annealed it, and it was even harder. So I couldn't manipulate it as easily as I wanted to, and I tried different ways, and so I had worked on it for some time. I probably had invested about 3 weeks in this silver thing, and I'm like, you know what? And this is another. I don't know if this is an engineering thing or just someone who just, I don't know. But I like kind of looked at my future self, and I'm like, okay, if I try this and this and this and it doesn't work, and try this and this and this, it won't work. And I was looking at the design of it. I was already not very happy with the design. It was wobbly, it was off balance, and all the ways I could think of trying to fix it never really, like thinking about what I would have to do to fix it to get to where I wanted it to be just seemed impossible. Like I'd have to create mass out of nothing kind of thing. That hasn't been invented yet, so
We're trying.
so I had to, and so this was the thing, is like I really like challenges, and I really like things. I don't like giving up on things, but later on in life, as having kids has made me realize my time is valuable, and I am not going to invest my time in something that I know has no reward at the end of it. And so I scrapped it and started over with just a mild steel and forging it into a modern looking knight instead. And that was sort of like the combination of, using engineering design processes to decide on, oh no, this isn't going to work. Let's scrap it.
That's nice to me that you've reached that point of recognition that the materials you were using are not suitable for the idea you had. And there's a tendency, especially in the maker community, I think, for the sunken cost fallacy of it's like I have to make this work because I've already spent this amount of time on it, or I've already spent this much on the materials for it. I have to push through. I have to make it work. And sometimes it's that recognition of that to go. It's the end project I need, not necessarily the use of these materials to get there. And I think that's something that is, and it's something I certainly struggle with. I mean, my room's littered with, half fulfilled projects that realistically I'm never going to finish off, and I need to just get rid of. But it's that thing of like, but these materials are here. I can make them into something else if I need to, or I need to push through. I need to get this done. I think Andy's also very, very similarly afflicted. So it's nice to actually have a chat with someone who can overcome that problem.
It took some time to get there.
I'm curious to know whether you might go back to that silverware because obviously the Maker chess set, there's a deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think is September. So that's kind of looming, and I can kind of appreciate kind of going, this isn't working. This is going to take too long to sort out.
Yeah.
I need to make something that will fit so I can get to the deadline, because this is not just about me making it. This is collaborating with 16 other or 15 other people to create something that's going to go to an auction. But yeah, I think I perhaps do this, or over the years I've certainly done this too often, where I've kind of gone, right, yeah, that hasn't worked. I've got to do this now, but I have a shed full of stuff that is kind of like, this could be good for something, or this is something I tried and didn't work, and I'm not going to let it go because I'm going to have another go at that at some point. And there's reached that point sometimes where you have to go, yeah, that was like 10 years ago. Maybe I should just let it go.
Mm-hmm. I think, okay, so I have it saved, and I've been saving a lot of scraps. And what I really want to do is I want to start casting. And I've only casted, well, I've casted just like basic plaster stuff, but then I've casted aluminium.
Aluminium.
Yeah. Thank you. We appreciate that.
I've casted aluminium.
Does that feel really weird to say?
Yes, it does. It feels like I'm being so silly right now.
Betraying your kin.
I feel like I'm like, no. Anyway, I casted that material in materials class in mechanical, like in college, and it was not successful. It was just what she wants to leave. Just one moment. Sorry.
Yeah, for the benefit of the audio listeners, later in the week, Lindsay's now turfing the cat out of the room.
The cat that is definitely a cat and not a ghost.
Yes. And Lindsay's back.
Yeah, she. Sorry about that, guys. She just was creating. You guys couldn't hear it, but she was just making so much noise in the background, and she's my alarm clock. She'll start knocking things off, and I'll have on this desk right here, I usually have my finished jewelry pieces that I'm going to mail out, and she'll start knocking them off at 5 o'clock in the morning.
That explains why you make them, out of robust materials and things then, and they're not like very delicately set gems.
Cat-proof.
Yeah. Cat-proof. Oh, no. Yeah, eventually I do want to get into gems, but I have to learn how to do cabochon work. And some of the process.
It's fun. You'll enjoy it. I've done a little bit.
Oh, that'll be great. Yeah, I actually have quite a bit that was given to me, and I just need to some stones, some gems that've been given to me. My mom used to do it, and she stopped because it was just too hot in the garage, and so she gave me all her work, and that's really what brought me into jewelry work, is because of that. But I can't. Oh yeah, so I want to do casting. Sorry. I was like, what was I talking about before?
Welcome to the waffle.
Yeah, Makers Waffle. Yeah.
Hello, guys. Listen to my brain going all over the place. This is really how I think throughout the day, by the way. It is.
You're in good company, don't worry.
And actually, that it does when Geeky Faye. We're gonna just keep on bringing up Geeky Faye's discussion, but
Ali's awesome. It's fair.
But I did start thinking, maybe there was a lot of different things, especially it goes undiagnosed ADHD. I don't know names of things. It goes undiagnosed in women and non-binary people, and so I was like, maybe this might be something, and it runs in my family, so. And so I looked up some of my symptoms, like, oh, maybe this is something I should probably look into.
It's surprising. Andy and I have had quite a few discussions about this sort of thing before, and there's a lot of symptoms that we've spotted in a large percentage of the maker community. It definitely fits, I think, quite well.
I would agree with that. I'm part of a maker space here, and so I interact with quite a bit of makers. Mainly men, and either retired age or young 20-ish, 20 to 30-year-old single guys. And it's really interesting to see how we all interact. And we are very good at being hyper-focused on things, but then we could very easily get distracted. And we could be discussing these things, and then my brain just starts going off, and then I'm like, oh, we were discussing something. I'm so sorry.
It would look a squirrel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I'd love to see somebody, a psychologist, actually dig into
Yeah.
the maker community to a certain extent, and to look at the proportions compared to the general population of ADHD, autism, the autistic spectrum. Autism is a tricky word because autistic is often used to define one particular type, and autism is a spectrum.
Yes.
It's a spectrum disorder, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I think most of the people, and probably me included, were on the spectrum of it, and
it's common in engineers and physicists. I would suggest it's again quite common, or not uncommon. I think it's probably the better way of putting it compared to the general population.
Yeah, I think it is definitely less rare in STEM fields than it is in non-STEM fields.
But it'd be interesting to also then see how it fits into kind of the extremes of art. People who are kind of
definitely. I think if you would look at some of the famous artists, you could probably be like, oh yeah, like you could probably look at a lot of artists and see tendencies. Even just like, I think you could probably even look at their art and figure that out.
Yeah, definitely. People like Mondrian, people like the very, very sort of linear engineering type, pieces.
Or like MC Escher.
Yeah,
I
forget Escher. Yeah.
Or Sol Lewitt. Leave it. Yeah, some of his work, he did many things, but some of the one-line stuff is far better than I do. I think it'd be interesting to explore. Maybe it's been done. I don't know. It's not something I've researched, but it'd be interesting to see whether that is the case.
Yeah.
So I think let's kind of change direction slightly. Going back, I think from what I've seen of your work, I think going into cabochons, going into mountain stones, you're not going to find that a difficult step. So I want to actually step back, because you said your mother was an art teacher, and obviously she influenced, and I know that she's you've mentioned many times in sort of stories in the past about kind of the influence, particularly with things like jewelry. So I'm assuming you came from a home that making art was it was a thing that was there. It was something that was a part of kind of growing up.
Yeah, I think making in general was a common thing. My parents were very focused on working with your hands, making things. Not always. I think if there was like maybe a problem with plumbing, my dad would hire a plumber. Like, he wouldn't necessarily do it himself. So there were certain aspects where they were like, we don't, and YouTube wasn't around either. So it was, but for basic home repairs, I think my parents would do things, but for anything very complex, they would just leave it to people who would know more than they would. But as far as my dad was, he's a very good cook. So he's a chemist. So cooking and chemistry go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And so cooking was a huge thing in my family. So my mom cooks really well. My dad cooks. My brother cooks. My sister cooks. Like, we all love cooking. We're foodies. We love like finding like the hole in the wall restaurant and eating some really good whatever it is that they make. So it doesn't have to be like a 5-star restaurant. We really appreciate food. And we cook all the time. And so like one of the things is on holidays, my dad will call me up, wish him, Merry Christmas or whatever. And the next thing he asks me is, okay, so what's for dinner? What are you making? That is our language of talking to one another. So that is one way we make things, is cooking. Another is gardening. They're really big into gardening and different plants and things like that. I don't know if that falls into making category, but I feel like a lot of makers that I see do garden. And so I wonder, like, I think I just saw a post from Crafts from Ellen.
Oh, the carrots.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
carrots. And I
They
was
look
like, man,
gorgeous.
those look great.
And I bet they taste lovely too.
Yeah.
We've grown carrots here one time, and we have like clay soil, and they were like this big. They were
like really flat disc like.
They were fat and squatty carrots, and they were very bitter. And I don't do carrots here. I practice more on herbs, and that's about it. And bananas and oranges, more the tropical stuff that I don't have to work so hard on.
Things that we can't grow here, but we can grow carrots all day long.
Yeah. So I feel like, I mean, gardening, you do employ certain ideas of making, like you make your garden bed, you maybe make improvements. Like brothers make, man, they have a really nice garden set up. Just like so jealous.
But I mean, because I suppose gardening is akin to engineering, isn't it? It is a very, there's chemistry involved, there's structure involved, there's there's a hell of a lot of that kind of science and engineering type stuff. But at the same time, it can be beautifully artistic as well. That kind of understanding that, the horticultural side of it, to then make something that's beautifully artistic or beautifully creative in its final presentation, if you like. I suppose that's a really good example, actually, of marrying the two.
Oh yeah.
The art versus the engineering, or the art versus the science side.
For a successful garden.
Yeah, mine is just all overgrown and needs concrete.
My garden is not near. The ones in the past never were that good, but I really, but it makes you appreciate and value the ones that are successful. If you do it, and you're like, wow, that's incredible. So, so gardening was a big deal. And then with my mom, she would actually, so this is another thing, is that it wasn't that we were creating art all the time, but we were observing all the time. So, and being aware of those observations. So I remember in the car, we were driving somewhere. This is I grew up in Philadelphia. So we're driving around like out west of Philadelphia, like where Valley Forge is. It's where I grew up.
Straight away, West Philadelphia. I just had the
yeah, not West.
Just went into the song.
West Philadelphia. West Philadelphia.
The theme tune just carried on in my head.
And so a lot of the trees were, all the leaves were coming in, and she would say, "Now look at the leaves of the tree. Are they just green? What are really the colors you really do see?" And so instead of just assuming, and I think a lot of people, we grow up assuming certain things. Leaves are green.
Yeah. Grass green. Sky is always blue.
Sky is blue.
There's
no gradient. There's no dark blue, light blue. That was the other thing, is like, look at the shading, look at the gradient of how the sky, notice how it's darker here. And as you go on, it gets lighter, or look at
and why. And why is it like that?
Yeah, the whys never really got answered. I think I exhausted my parents a lot on that one, but I eventually got those answered later on in life. But but we were very busy looking at and observing the world around us. Like, look at how. I think of Andy Berkey when I see like water droplets, and like when you look at a water droplet and how the world is like upside down, and how the light kind of goes around it. And I feel like we weren't always making, but we were definitely observing. And that, to me, is actually, I feel like, unites engineering, science, and art all together.
It's challenging your perceptions of the world, isn't it? To understand it more.
Exactly. And I think science does that, engineering does that, and art does it. They always challenge the status quo of things. Science is not, going through and finding the why, and then going through and readjusting the why. And, like, because what we were saying, like that scientific, whatever, we'd say, oh, well, I'm this kind of learner. And then what does science do? That's nope, that's nothing. Right. I mean, we saw that again with all the research going on with the pandemic, new things coming out all the time. And I feel like art does that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically with the pandemic, I saw a comment that was referenced to that, specifically saying that this is one of the kind of rare opportunities where the average population is now seeing science in real time, rather than seeing science after it's figured the stuff out. Where normally the average person would get the results of a lot of science experiments and like, this is the new bit of information that's in the textbooks or whatever. Whereas the last 18 months, they've seen that evolution that of the knowledge, that testing a hypothesis, finding out the results, correlating the data with other people running similar experiments, and that actual real time kind of bringing that knowledge to where we're at now with that. And I think that's probably opened a lot of people up to that as it's like science isn't just the thing you read in the textbook. It's this constant learning and constant challenging perceptions, constant reevaluating what you think you know or what you think you might know.
Totally.
And like you said, that marries beautifully with an artistic view of the world as well.
Yeah, I think they challenge. I mean, art can be used in a lot of different ways, but I feel like the emerging artists, like modern day artists, they challenge the thought of the day, or they open up a different perspective or a new way of thinking about something. There's not a lot of artists that I see doing that. Like I think we all think of Banksy as one of them.
I was going to mention Banksy.
With the
and Tom Sachs is another one.
The piece that it got auctioned off, and someone paid
put through the shredder.
Just insane, sickening amount of money on it.
Yeah.
And it was like a comment of that. It was like, how much is this worth?
Absolutely. I mean, there's comments in the chat about that, about art being a very subjective thing to the person viewing it, and I think it's the same with worth as well. And again, I mean, in the same way that again, where art and science would quite often kind of interweave in a similar way, that kind of someone might look at something and say that is art, in the same way that someone might look at a scientific hypothesis and say this is what I think is going to happen. And in the same way that someone could challenge an artist or challenge a piece of art for what it is, in the same way that you would challenge a hypothesis to find out the outcome. You stick a piece of what someone calls art in a gallery and it might do well or it might not. You don't necessarily know the future until you play it out. Exactly.
I think that's a really I think that scares a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
I've had this conversation so many times with people. I want to do this and this. Do you think it's going to work? I'm like, well, I've never seen it done before. And so how about you just try it and just see what happens? But a lot of times that it doesn't happen because since they haven't seen it done before, they're nervous that it won't work out. But I mean, I can see if it costs too much of their money or time, I can totally see why you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But I feel like if it doesn't cost you a whole lot and it's not too much of a time sacrifice, just try it, do it.
Yeah.
That's
quite core to a lot of makers anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I think. Well, so I've had this conversation a lot in our makerspace. So people ask me something. I'm not saying like this. I'm not saying people come to me as like I'm giving wisdom. Sorry, that sounds weird. Because usually I always say I don't know, but if I were you, I would try it, because that's what I would do. I would just try it, and I don't need to know the steps. And you could just like take the first step in trying it, and if it doesn't work, think of a different solution. Or you can, but a lot of times what happens is they get stuck in, I need to know all the steps so I can start the first one. And sometimes that can be a really
That's the planning engineer there.
it can be a barrier to
It can be a massive hurdle for some. I find that with
Yeah.
certainly my youngest,
yes.
they need to kind of have the whole thing planned out rather than just kind of going, yeah, actually let's just dive in.
Let's
Let's
react to the
just
problem
see
as
if
they
this will.
come.
Yeah, let's just see if this will. Let's start.
Yeah, and I feel like
it's overcoming that hurdle.
And I feel like that's the difference between science and engineering and artists and engineer. I feel like that's a connection between science and art, where you're a lot of times it's experimenting in art, and in science you don't know what's going to happen, and you might as well just take that leap. Now, the other thing I noticed was, someone said this. Who said it? It's not science until you observe something. Does that make sense? So you could try it, but if you don't make it, no, they wrote, it's not science if you don't write it down. I don't agree with that.
Adam Savage is
okay,
science
that's
if you're writing it down.
Yeah, I think it's funny, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I was with my daughter yesterday, and we were walking on this boardwalk where there's wooden boards, and there was a stringer on the center, and it was screwed in the center, and though the 2x4s were screwed on obviously the ends, and then in the center it was screwed onto a stringer that was supporting our weight. And we were kind of walking over like a wetland area, and I've told you guys before, she considers herself a scientist, which that's great for a 9-year-old. And she was saying, if you walk here, it's louder than if you walk here. So, and she's always thinking of ways to be a ninja and to be quiet. So she'll sneak up, like I'll be working here, and she'll pop up right here. Did you hear me? So she's always finding ways to be quiet. So I just thought it was interesting that I was not observing how I was walking along the boardwalk, but she was very aware and observing how her footsteps sounded on the center of right on the stringer, or versus in between, where you're going to have some flexing very mildly. It wasn't that bad of a boardwalk, but you have the vibrations hitting the air below, and it's reverberating back, so you're having a louder step here versus where it was being supported on the stringer. I mean, she doesn't know the science, and she doesn't know the engineering behind any of that, but she did observe that it was quieter there versus there. And so that's like the first step, is just observing and being aware. I don't remember what started.
Absolutely,
why I said all this. But that observing and being aware of those things.
I mean, that is the first step in the scientific method, isn't it?
Exactly.
The observation.
And I think that's also the springboard for art and creating, or at least can make your art even better, or make it more. I lost a word. It's this, whatever that is. Describe that. If people who are just listening to podcasts, I'm moving my hands wildly about. So whatever that word is.
In a kind of a bigger motion. So, it's it's more thorough, it's more in depth.
Amplify and deepen your artwork even more based on those observations. And it may not necessarily, and for art, it may not necessarily be an observation about the natural world around you, about what you see and physically touch, but it could be observations about humanity and the depths of that, or thinking about mathematical concepts as a way of communicating things. I mean, you could go really into like a meditation on those things, and that could amplify your art so much more. And just that being awareness and observing those things can can just really help you out in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Something that's just been sprung to mind when we were talking about like observation and sky in particular before, when we were talking about linking in with kids and their kind of curiosity in the way that they view the world, is that in asking those difficult questions, like we were saying before, like why is the sky blue? Why is the sky blue is not so much route one, but it is a fairly common thing for kids to ask parents, and especially parents who they see as having technical answers. And one of the things that it was like different takes on these common questions, and specifically one of them, to sort of to challenge or to inspire conversation in teachers and parents, was not to ask why is the sky blue, but why isn't the sky purple? To adjust that question enough to spark more thought and spark more of a discussion, rather than just the standard answers. And it was just something that point of observation, that point of being a parent and having those questions thrown at you, it's like, I'm glad I just got the why is the sky blue, not why isn't it purple.
I mean that leads to an interesting kind of concept within teaching. There's a I've forgotten the name of it. There's a hierarchy of skills. And kind of simple recall is at kind of one end, and at the other end you've got things like synthesis and analysis, and that ability to be able to extend a student from just simply recalling something to creating their own thing, and extending that evaluation to questions like that. And that's a very powerful technique that unfortunately in most education systems there isn't time to kind of go into those rabbit holes of query, because it's a really nice, it is a nice way of teaching something. Yeah, I think it's physics. I mean, this is a perfect physics example. Why is the sky not purple rather than why is the sky blue? Yeah, if you're talking about Rayleigh scattering and proportions to wavelengths, and it's a fascinating approach to take, but it also kind of requires time, and it requires a build up in the student to be able to get to that point. It's not something that all students get. I mean, like Lindsay, you talked about how one of the most important things that you've been taught is that skill of observation, and not everyone gets taught those things, not in that environment of the home, where kind of it's just fundamental to, I think, student success. It's very easy. Schools often get kind of blamed for lack of student success or for student success, but we forget that there's this massive proportion of their time is spent in a different environment, and it's that environment that has been fundamental. So when you do have students that come from homes where they've been taught how to observe, or they come from homes where there's the availability of books, or there's art equipment, and they've had access to that, I think that creates a very a boost in many students on how they can achieve and whether they can actually handle questions like that at the time when they're being asked. Because I would suggest that more people can do things than they think they can, but in the Western world, actually probably globally, the majority of education systems follow a chronological, you've got to achieve this by this age, and you've got to be able to achieve this by this next age, and you do this in this next age, and that doesn't suit all people. People don't progress through because of those differences in their background, partly, and possibly kind of sort of nature as well, in sort of genetic brain structure. What were they fed when they were young?
Nature versus
whether
nature,
they will. Yeah, well, it's nature and nurture, I think. But
Yeah,
I think there's
absolutely,
those
yeah.
elements of that chronology doesn't fit.
Oh yeah, totally. Yep.
But I made an education waffle ramble rant again, aren't I?
No, that's great.
Be careful of that. And
Got to set him off.
so, I mean, yeah, let's just change it back on to kind of you mentioned that your daughter considers herself a scientist. Do they makers as well? Are you kind of encourage them to make things and do
Well,
things?
I try to, but it's not. They have their own interests, and they're different than my interests, and I have to be okay with that. So they're very much
the time, isn't it?
They're very much into programming, so they're very good at programming in Scratch. Is actually so if
Fantastic.
you have kids and you are wanting your kids to learn programming, I did not have that opportunity when I was their age. I started learning programming in college. I didn't even have it in high school. And so I really struggled with programming. I remember even crying in a professor's office because I was so overwhelmed and angry. But when I'm angry, I cry. And I was so mad that I didn't understand it. And so for them to have that opportunity to learn programming when they're this young, it's like, for me, it's something they're really into. So they've been programming, and so my son's been programming into a like LED thing. So he's got it to the LEDs
Arduino type stuff.
To do little emojis and stuff like that. So that was
brilliant!
Cool. So he's like, I wanted to do a poop emoji. And it was little, he's realizing like that some of our images, that he's learning differences between images, and the text images are very different. So but coming up to some issues in programming, and so it's not coming as easily, which I think is great, because it does come easily to him, and so I want him to struggle a little bit. Yeah, I really do. I mean,
it's one of those things that a parent would instantly get exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah.
That needing to experience something that actually challenges them rather than just comes easy.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think that, and that's the thing. So I started blacksmithing when he was about 5-6 years old. He was not old enough to do it with me. Or at least I don't. So there are some people who will have their kids blacksmith at that age. I didn't think he was able to do
ready for it,
because I do think it's a dangerous.
Not quite there,
It's a dangerous activity. He could get really badly burned if he's not careful. And I have seen, so at our blacksmith meetup, some people will bring their kids, and which is fine. I think that's great. But I have seen little kids get severely burned, and it's not fun. So anyway, I have tried to have him blacksmith with me, and he's like, "This is hard." I'm like, "Yeah, it's hard, and it doesn't come easy." And yeah, and just try it, and he'll do it for a bit, and then he's like, "No, I don't want to do it." And I'm not one to be an oppressive parent to be like, "You got to do this," even if you don't like it, because I don't want him to hate it. So we're like, okay, we'll stop and we'll come back to it at a different time when you feel like it. And my daughter's expressed interest in it, and she'll do it with me for a bit. She loses, it's hot, and so it's just not as enjoyable. But and it's physically demanding. So, but she did help me make some teachers copper keychains for her teachers, and she stamped them. And
cool.
Well, I helped. It was scary, actually. I was holding the stamp. She had a 2.5 pound hammer, and I'm like, "Wait, no!" I'm like, "This way," and just, and I'm like holding it, and I'm like, "Oh God, don't hit my thumb." please don't hit my hand.
Did you close your eyes at the point when she was about to swing?
Yes, like I videotaped. I think I taped it and I posted it in my story, and people were just laughing because it was hilarious to watch, and it was so. I had a heart attack doing that, but I felt it was also important for her to be involved in making these gifts for her teachers, that she could feel she was part of something, and her teachers were so excited that she made, helped make them. So and then one of the teachers was like, could you make them for all the teachers? And I'm like, no, please, no, my hands, no, please don't.
No, don't do production.
No. We're one and done here. We're good. So
straight away, I'm thinking of jigs now where you could hold the punch in like a block of wood that goes over the top, and then you can save your fingers and stuff then, and get into the jigging it for production mode.
I think we found out some things with her teachers, and this year we just met our teachers. That they start school this week, and I'm already thinking teachers' gifts with copper keychains again. And I'm like, this time we're going to do etching. We're going to do acid etching. This is a lot. Like I can put gloves on her. I can put plastic goggles. It'll feel like a science experiment. She'll love it. And she'll make something. And it's just, we'll check all the boxes for her. And I can keep all my fingers. So we're going to do that this time.
Which is definitely useful, I think, for being able to make future keychains as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, keeping fingers definitely.
It's dangerous.
Definitely want to improve. I haven't worked with a number of people who are digitally challenged. I would suggest having digitally the fingers digital as opposed to. Actually, most of them are digitally challenged technologically as well. But
I mean, so far, all of our guests of today, we've got an average of 10 fingers each.
For our guests so far, yes, but the average number of fingers worldwide is probably less than 10.
Less than 10, yeah.
Probably.
Well, I don't know if you include Norfolk and Alabama.
I have seriously smashed my fingers before, and I was hammering some. I don't even know what they're called. See these metal rings on a piece of fabric for it to be attached to something.
Grommet.
Yes, I was hammering grommets. I warned you guys beforehand. Pre-show, I said, guys, I may not know certain names to things because I'll forget. So just feel free to say what it is. I won't feel.
Like I said, it's a condition called lethologica. I suffer from it myself. Just not being able to remember the word at the right time. And I can always remember lethologica, but I'll forget simple things.
That's hilarious.
But a little later, the word will pop out. If it doesn't actually appear during the conversation it's required in, it will appear
4 o'clock in
once
the
the
morning,
conversation is finished.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And it comes to you at that certain time, at that right moment. You're like, why couldn't I remember it at that particular time? Yeah, I was hammering grommets in this really thick canvas fabric, and I had my just giant blacksmith hammer because that was what I had at the time. I mean, not a nice blacksmith hammer. It was
like a 4 pound or something.
It was like one you get at a big box store. It was my beginner hammer.
We call it a club hammer, probably.
Yeah. So the face of it was not that big of a deal, kind of thing. That's what I'm trying to say. And I would just hammered, and I don't know what happened, but I wasn't looking, and my hammer moved right to the right and hit my thumb dead on, and it was like a really good hammer blow. It was like, if I was hammering metal, it would have been like great, but it was on my thumb, and
they're a little bit squishier than metal, I found.
It was the worst. It was the worst feeling, and so that memory came back when she was about to hammer, and I can't deal with that pain again. That was awful.
I mean, I suppose the benefit is you'd have probably put more force into it, having practiced the hammering. You'd have put much more force in than she would, obviously.
I would hope so, maybe. Oh no, she's the fierce one.
Yeah, but once it's a certain height, a certain amount of potential energy, it doesn't matter.
True.
Yep.
Yeah. hitting that thumb. And
Hmm.
it's that
I think
if there's that moment, isn't it? If you really hit your thumb, there's that kind of fraction of a second before the pain registers. You know you've just hit your thumb. You know it's going to hurt, and there's this moment in time when it's not yet hurting,
it
and
hasn't yet,
then
but I know it's
bang. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and Tom Scott did a video on what he called it's the oh no second, which is the moment of time where something like that happens, where you do something bad,
Yeah.
and it's the moment just after you've done the bad thing before the consequences happen.
Yeah.
Oh, I've had a few of those.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Usually it's when I'm burning myself. Unfortunately. Oh no.
When you pick up the bit of black metal that's still 300
That's
degrees
happened to
or
me
whatever.
before, but it wasn't my fault. I'll say that. So what happens when you blacksmith with other people, and this guy, he was very new, and so that was his excuse, which is fine. Like, he didn't know better, pretty much, and he was working with a piece of steel, and he was like, "This isn't working for me." Well, I assume this is what happened because I didn't see it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone and picked it up. But he put it in. We have like a shared box of tongs, and I needed to change out my tongs and get like something else. And I go and I reach in and I pull out this piece of steel was black, and my hand, it was like, oh no, like this is hot. And like, where's the slack tub? Dunking my hand in water. It was, and that's gonna blister. Yeah. And that really made me, I think that was I was probably, I know people, I know a lot of people can't imagine me angry, but I was livid. I was so mad.
Yeah, well, imagine, yeah.
A lot of swear words were coming out. I was furious. So it was so bad.
It's interesting because Steve from Mincham Metalworks, I did a blacksmith day with him and my brother Rupert, who's also in the chat. And very, very early on into the day, that was like Steve's kind of rundown was, do not do this. And he has a pointing stick that is something that he uses. He got himself into that habit of pointing using the metal stick instead of pointing using his finger, because of the amount of times he'd like gone to point on a piece of steel and realized end up with a blister on the end of the finger or stuff like that, or something goes to fall off the anvil and your instinct is to go and try and catch it, give it its fluorescent orange.
Especially if you've been forging all day, you're kind of tired, and you kind of start to get a little
reactions kick
comfortable.
in more than brain does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's easy to make these mistakes. It's easy to get seriously hurt.
Definitely.
And they do happen. There was a post I saw earlier this evening. Dan from the Sidings Workshop. He'd been maintaining his table saw, but was rushing, tired, didn't finish it off quite right, fed a piece of timber through. It caught on a lip, and suddenly he's got a piece of maple heading towards him at high speed. He got away uninjured. But for every person that happens that's uninjured, there's somebody else that's going to get potentially seriously hurt.
Unfortunately, so.
And it's easily done. I think we often, particularly those of us who are not full-time makers, who are doing it after a day's work or a day looking at family, and you then sort of dive into the workshop. You've got, I've got 40 minutes. What can I do in 40 minutes? And you're rushing, and it's tired, and it's easy to make mistakes. And there's going to be people who get seriously hurt from those, as I said, and I think we've all had those warnings. I mean, I commented to Dan here, kind of like, sometimes it's useful to get those little reminders every now and again that the tools we're dealing with are really, really quite dangerous, and the adrenaline pumping, cortisol pumping, heart rate raising, fraction of a second where a piece of wood is spinning round super fast or flying across the table saw at a couple of 100 miles per hour. It's a good reminder, but not really the best way of.
It's a better way of
on top
learning
of
a
it.
lesson than it actually happening.
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
It's a slightly better scenario than it could be. Like you say, it's a very good wake up call, isn't it?
Mhm.
But it's finding those ways to not have that happening.
I mean, my in-laws do tool training. They run a health and safety training company, and they do a lot of tool training on things like that, and forklift training, and it's a lot of reminding people of other people's mistakes as as lessons. Sorry, I interrupted you then, Andy.
Well, I was going to ask. It's kind of we've kind of seen sort of history. We anyone who follows you on Instagram knows that you kind of stories are your place where you show your process and your portfolio, your profile pictures. That shows your profile. But are there things that you want to do that you haven't done yet? Is there a big project you want to do, or is there something that you kind of do you want to build yourself a half-scale space shuttle out of copper and blacksmithing techniques? What's the dream project?
Well, I've talked to you guys a little bit about some of the ideas I have in mind with the casting. That to me is like a dream, just to getting those skills. And to me, a dream project would be taking all these things and incorporating into one really neat build. It may not necessarily be big, but it might be more detailed oriented. I'm really admiring a lot of jewelers who can be very precise in their creations. It's not me necessarily. I'm not very precise. I feel like I used that all up in my previous life. And I don't have any left. I don't know why. It's really weird, actually.
Maybe it's a freedom that you don't have to be.
Yes. That's
You've
been released from having to be precise.
Yes.
So now you're exploring not being precise. But I would wager that if you decided that for your jewelry or for your other metalwork, precision was what you needed for a particular thing, I bet you could.
I mean, I need precision in when I do riveting, because obviously the rivet needs to fit very snugly in the hole. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. I mean, I do have to be precise in certain ways. And I guess I feel like it's a little bit of a rebellious thing for me not to be precise because I had to be precise for so long. If that makes any sense.
I totally agree. I kind of almost goes back to me kind of doing art, and drawing, and
not physics.
It's
no, I agree.
I mean, I've done a couple this week, which were kind of physics drawings. Thermos flask last night, and those diagrams. On Facebook, one of my previous colleagues sort of commented about how the drawing I did earlier in the week. I can't remember which one it was now. Wouldn't have scored many marks in an exam, and she was absolutely right. If it had been handed to me as a piece of homework.
Yes.
When I was still teaching, I would have been absolutely livid and said, go back and do this again. You've taken no care whatsoever. It was a parachutist. It was force diagrams. It was parachutist in free fall.
I did get that same comment about a piece that I made from my mom. Earlier this year I was doing the copper bowls and I was raising them or whatever, but I knew the proper way to do it is to have a complete edge all the way around. You want that, hemisphere look. But I liked the idea of fabric folding, and I had a really fabric folded bowl, and it looked organic. And she said to me, we were eating dinner together because my parents had just gotten vaccinated. So we went to visit, and then she said something like, "I think they're beautiful, but I know that it would get a failing grade in the metalworking class." Because she took those classes, and I said, "You're absolutely right. I would totally fail that class, because it's not."
But not an art class, no.
Well, right. It's not, and that's the thing. It was funny is that it wasn't technically right.
This is again kind of getting into that education thing. This is a thing that you see, not so much in physics, but having sort of taught in technology and spent time hanging around with the art teachers and the technology or shop, you might put in the States, teachers.
Yeah, this would be more of like a shop thing rather than art.
Yeah,
if it was art class, it would have been fine.
Yeah, but you see even
reasoning.
Yeah, but you see something in art, even in art, you kind of see something. You see a student who's produced something that is fantastic, and to a certain extent, could be taken if you put it into the right gallery.
Yeah,
people would go, "That's fantastic! I love it." Yeah, they're obviously envisaging this, they're doing that, and there would be no question that it's a fantastic piece of art.
Yeah,
but because it's for a qualification. Yeah. And there's a whole kind of structure of marking behind it, and they've got to satisfy certain things. If they were missing a certain criteria, they wouldn't get the top marks, even though it might be something that sells for huge amounts of money if put into an art gallery.
I think, though, coming from as an artist and coming from an art teacher, there are certain techniques that, like just anything else, like if you took a machining class or you took a woodworking class and learning how to do certain things the right way, because in some ways art isn't necessarily like you're not going to start building bridges based on your things you learned in art, right? But if you don't learn to do them the right way, that kind of thing. So I feel like someone said something like, you learn to do them the right way in order to break the things.
Know the rules to break them.
Yeah. I think that's something Andy and I've discussed quite a lot as well.
And I think that is true. And so, I mean, you want to have a certain sort of way of things. My mom's an art teacher. She normally wouldn't say that to anybody. She wouldn't do that to her students at all. She's actually probably one of the best art teachers I know. She is always supportive, always encouraging. She gives constructive criticism, not like that's terrible, but she'll say, so you look at a piece, and this is, I want to say this with Make It So, because I think this is a good example. I don't know if she's still on. She may not. She may have left.
Might have fallen asleep. She was saying before she was going to try.
Yeah, I know. We had a chat. Well, I won't say anything. I'm not surprised she didn't last as long. She's had this weekend. Anyway,
similar chat. Yeah.
But I was having trouble with an art piece, and I said, "There's something not right with it. It doesn't look right." Because it doesn't look right. There's something about it, and so I sent her the picture. And what's really good about artist communities can be very isolated on purpose. Like we normally, like you're very lucky to find other artist friends and you can talk to one another and help each other out and stuff. It can be very competitive and not that great. That's the difference between the maker community and the artist community, by the way. That's a whole nother story, another waffle. But anyway, so I sent her a picture of the image I was working on. And what she did was we troubleshooted one concept of figuring out a composition issue is to like squint your eyes and kind of look at the highlights and the shadows and kind of seeing the flow of the art piece. Does your eye move around the piece? And it wasn't doing that. And I was trying to figure out where is my issue? Why isn't my eye wanting to move? And sometimes if you're this close to something and you're working on it, you can't see the issue. So it's good to step back and talk to somebody else about it. So she sent back and she had changed the contrast of it in her photo editing software and was like, oh, okay, I see the issue right here. That's where I need to work on it. And so that to me is a way of how art class and art teachers can be show constructive criticism. Is like, here is your piece. There's something not right. Let's figure out what it is together. It's not anything to do with, and this is the thing is with art, is because it can be so personal. It can be your identity on the page. And so when someone says it might need work, you could feel like you need work.
Well, I was going to say that's linking into the psychology of it, isn't it? That
Yes. And so I mean, but I've done it so long that kind of working together like that is like, it won't bother me so much as I don't. So like I'm willing to accept that. Well, it depends. Like it depends on
debugging art.
Yeah. And so this sort of talking was great, and I was able to like solve the problem, and it worked out. And so anyway, I don't remember where we got this from. Oh yeah. So yeah, I think depending on the art teacher and if that person can be trusted to give you advice, if you are willing to allow that advice from that person, like it's not a one person way. It has to be a two person dialogue.
It's got to be respect there as well, hasn't there?
Exactly. It has to be
take that advice.
Respect and trust. It has to be a bit of vulnerability of being like,
of course,
I may not know what I'm doing. And then humility from the person giving the advice as well. Like,
of course,
I may not know what I'm doing either.
But let's find out together.
It's
exactly
that subjectivity of it, isn't it? You know, it might not look right to you for one aspect of it, but it might not look right to someone else for a completely different reason.
Yeah. And I think as artists, you tend to know, and if you know the person's style and you know them well enough, you kind of know what they're going for. And like I was with two other artist friends about a couple months ago, and we were in her studio, and she was showing us her abstract work. It's abstract art. It's not like she's trying to capture a likeness or capture something, but you can see in some abstract pieces, there's some reason why I like this abstract piece better than this abstract. Why is that? There are reasons behind it.
Are you familiar with Vasily Kandinsky as an abstract artist?
Yes. And so, but she had a piece that we were looking at it. She's like, I'm having trouble with this one piece. And we were looking at it, and it was a little bit of, it was more surrealistic art where it's a little abstract and a little, there's some realism in it. Like she had some fishes and everything. And we're looking at it, and we're like, take the piece. And I'm like, let's just flip it this way. And for the people who are listening, I picked up the piece and just turned it upside down. And then we looked at it, and we're like, that's it. That fixed it. I mean, she's still going to paint it and things like that and add more, but it changed the whole idea of where it was. And we came to that problem like, we don't know. We like it, but we understand why you want to improve it. And she was like, I'm not happy with this piece. Do you have any advice? So that kind of dialogue was how it started. And we've been friends for 20 years almost. And so we have a trust build up, which I wouldn't normally do with anyone else with that, but that was, something we do very often. And
it's good to have that mutual trust and mutual respect for each other's work to be able to problem solve something like that.
Yes,
I think it's quite a rare thing to have someone that you can mutually do that with.
Yeah, that's what I like. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a gift to have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Have somebody that you can kind of have that level of trust with,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to have those difficult conversations with potentially about your work,
Mm-hmm.
because quite often many of us kind of get defensive about our
It's that
work, and if we're
vulnerability,
doing
isn't it?
something,
Like you say.
if we're doing something for a client, if you're doing
Mm-hmm.
a piece for a client, and you kind of are they going to like it? Are they saying they like it because they're just trying to be nice? And
Sense of obligation.
half an hour
Yeah.
later they'll kind of be going, "Oh, I said it was nice to him when I met, when I picked it up off him, but this bit here is just really quite, I don't like that at all."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I guess possibly my own paranoia. But that ability
No.
to have somebody, we can go, look, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with it. I don't know why. What can I do? What can I do better?
Mm-hmm.
Got any thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah, even if they don't necessarily, it's something you should go to somebody. Yeah, if you're when I was doing more jewelry work, and silver sort of smithing, if I was making something at home and I go to my tutor and go, I tried doing this and it really isn't very good. Yeah, and they can go, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can tell you that the thing you're doing wrong is you bet you're using the wrong sort of pickle, or you're not hitting your solder up high enough, or you're not using enough flux, or a dozen other kind of things, which they've made that mistake in the past, and they can kind of go, that's why you're making a mistake. But when it's about concept, when it's about it's not a technique thing necessarily, but this just doesn't look right to me. To have somebody that you can kind of go and say, we think, what is this really that bad? What do you think I should do?
Yeah.
And have that ability to trust them to go, it's okay. But have you thought of turning that piece around, turn it through 90 degrees, and suddenly it's a whole new picture, and it flows in a different way, and it becomes something that goes, like you say, that works now.
Mm-hmm. And it's totally subjective too. I mean, that's the weird thing about it. But in a lot of ways, I think it's not. It's like it's kind of subjective. But in other ways, like we, as humans, something about it when we look at something and perceive it in our mind, it's either pleasing to our eye or not. And it's like, why is that?
Well, this is where it's sort of linking to, like, especially with someone like Kandinsky, is there are certain things that we know work well together, and certain things that with composition and color balances and things like that. And for those not familiar with Kandinsky, he was an artist and a composer, Russian guy, turn of the century. Forget the dates, but he had a condition called synesthesia, which is a particularly rare condition of the senses. When you're sort of first born, all of your senses are kind of linked. It's all processing through the same kind of lumps of the brain, and as you age, the senses start to split up. So smell becomes smell, and sight becomes sight, hearing becomes hearing. People with synesthesia often end up with senses that are still linked in the neural pathways. So for him, his vision and his hearing were somewhat linked. So a lot of his pieces, it's abstract pieces, but they're very, very musical. Because for him, he would compose music, and he would, while playing music or listening to the music he was composing, he would see color and flashes of light and things like that. And conversely, when he was painting, he would hear music at the sight of the color and everything else. So a lot of his pieces are very much that kind of thing of something like music, which can be incredibly mathematically driven. There's a lot of things to music that is just algorithms essentially. So that can then influence that, like you say, the composition and things that are less subjective and perhaps more objective in an art sense. Well, that might just be me going down very philosophical waffle there.
No, I thought that was great.
I've known my eldest has some elements of synesthesia. Tends to sort of taste colour.
Yeah.
For example, I don't know if she's grown out of it now. I'll ask her tomorrow, and see if that's still something that she experiences, because it'll be interesting to see how. It's the whole kind of concept of. One of the questions I used to ask as a kind of preteen was, is the colour that I see? Am I experiencing it the same way as somebody else? You're seeing yellow, but I'm seeing green. But we've agreed that is there some agreement about are we actually experiencing it in the same way?
We know from the scientific point of view is that no, we're not. We're all seeing things in our own way.
Well, and I think the cones. So we have 3 cones in our eye that I see: red, green, and blue.
Yep.
And so if one is shifted a little differently, we may not see. Like my son and my dad are both colorblind for red green, and it's very common in men. And so, and I've talked to him ever since he was little. I'm like, you see color differently than me. But then I've also read something about women who with color blindness. So my dad sees it
the other way.
I might have an extra cone in my eye to make me see color differently than everyone else.
Well, so this is what I was going to say. I was with you mentioning about the 3 cones as to whether or not you knew why it was more common in color blindness was more common in men than women, and it's because of that women tend to have an extra cone compared to men, but there are a handful of women who have an extra cone who can see an even broader spectrum of color than the average human. Which I just find fascinating.
It's mind blowing, isn't it? It's absolutely mind blowing.
And this is probably why I argue with people, well, my husband especially, with what color that chair is in that other room. It's goldish, greenish, sage color.
I mean, it's a beautiful way of settling the argument of like, honey, what color should we paint the room? It's like, I don't care. You've got an extra cone cell than I have, so you're better at color stuff.
Well,
I'm genetically defective.
What's interesting is my son's room before he was born. I painted it like this. It's that avocado green color. That was the color at the time, and I don't know. He must have been 4 or 5 years old at the time, and I'm like, he's like, why is my room the color of poop? Like, because it looked brown. It looked like brown poop to him, color. And I'm like, okay, we are repainting the room. I'm so sorry. I did not realize that you were experiencing your room in a different way than we had. So he picked out the color because. Like, I want you to enjoy the color you see.
An old friend of mine was.
What color do you pick?
Like a light blue. So I've also noticed color people who are colorblind, they really gravitate towards blues and purples.
Yeah. Makes sense.
They look the same. Purples and blues look the same to them.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, an old mate of mine, he had a red car. Similar, sort of slightly faded red to this top, and he'd have to replace a door on it. So he went and just bought the paint that looked the same as the car, and it wasn't until about probably a year later that his friends sort of finally explained why they were laughing in the fact that he'd basically bought pink. So he had this red car with this one sort of fluorescent pink door that. To him, it all looked the same color, but it's very cruel friends.
I guess that's the importance of kind of Pantone, isn't it? That's why they charge so much for their sets of swatches, in order to get things kind of looking right, and getting our attention, so to speak. Which perhaps might be a segue into.
That's a beautiful
Yeah.
segue into what's
Yeah,
catching up.
yeah. It's like what's just a benefit of the listeners, perhaps who haven't heard before, Lindsay, because I'm sure you're familiar. Yeah, we kind of ask about attention grabbing. What's been grabbing your attention? So it might be things you've been working on. It might be things you're working towards. It might be something you've seen or a book you've read or something. It can be one thing. It can be many. It doesn't. It's totally up to you. So, what's some of your things that have been grabbing your attention?
Let's see. I started. I usually don't pay much attention to the reels on Instagram, but they've been kind of showing me some. What was it? Some makery type artisty reels lately, which I'm kind of glad about because it's been really terrible stuff lately.
That's really terrible.
Sometimes. And let's see, I bookmarked it because I couldn't remember her name, but I started watching this person do lino cuts, and I was just mesmerized by her technique and just what she was making. And so I just started watching a lot of people who do lino cuts. So that's block printing, and so they're cutting the block to do printing. And I've done that in the past, but it's always been kind of like basic stuff. It hasn't been very detailed, engrossing work. And she has quite a bit of a following, so it's not like no. Where I saved. Okay, her name, and she's got like 100,000 followers. So I feel like I'm like, look at this famous person that I'm Instagram famous, really.
Still an attention grab, still perfectly fine.
Her name, she's from Amsterdam, and it's Marit Hanninen. See, I wouldn't remember that name at all.
Yeah, I might have to get you to send me a link to that one so I can put it into the show notes. So I'm not even going to attempt to spell all that.
She's been doing these very intricate, she'll do these intricate things of peonies, and she did one of like a crane. Some of it reminds me of some Japanese lino cuts. And others, it reminds me of like tattoo art of what you would see. I don't think it was her. There was also another person I saw that she offered up if you wanted, this is the person. She always receives questions about, can I take your piece of art and put it like as a tattoo on me? And so this I thought was really interesting was that this happens a lot with artists where their work gets taken, but they don't get permission, and they don't get paid for their work, but it gets taken by people, and they're like turns it into a tattoo for them. Which, I mean, with the maker community, it's a little different because everything is what makes makers and artists different is makers. It's all of it is open source. I don't know if you guys ever thought about it that way because it really
unless you make it a
me.
river table, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then that guy's not a maker, is he?
He's a businessman now, isn't he?
He's a businessman. He's not a maker, because a maker would be open source, and that to me, coming from an artist background and coming into the maker community, that was the one thing that I really had trouble with at first, because I was always taught to like your work is like copyrighted, even though you learn from other artists and you draw their work. So it's
everything's a remix.
Yeah, but I mean, if you paint their work and try to sell it off, as your own inspired piece, then it's a little shady.
Yeah, that's shady, isn't it? If you, I think there are people who kind of hide their techniques. Yeah, I've heard so many stories of people kind of contacting somebody to say, "Look, I want to make something. It uses the technique that you're doing. Yes. It's completely different to what you're doing, but I want to know a bit more about your technique." And they go, "Nope, not telling you. Yeah, because you're competition when that happens."
Yeah, and I feel like that's the artist community does that a lot.
But if you're
And,
producing
you know,
something, different, if you're not just directly reproduce, it's like with cutting boards. I mean, there's so many people making cutting boards,
yeah.
and there's a
yeah.
limited number of techniques, but there's an infinite number of possibilities in if you're combining different woods together.
Mhm.
And unless you kind of take look, there's this exact pattern, I'm going to try and reproduce that exact pattern and sell it. That would be wrong. I think,
Yeah.
and I don't think anyone would. Apart from somebody who's trying to make a quick buck by copying directly somebody else's who's charging
Yeah.
good money for something they've developed.
Yeah. So,
But
going back to
I
this
like
person,
that.
she created like a tattoo pass. So if someone would go on her store and they would buy a tattoo pass on her Etsy store, and then they can use and she has different things, like if you want on this, particular ones, they can buy her picture for a tattoo pass, which I thought was brilliant.
That's a fantastic. It's like a lifting the guilt, then, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And actually, this happened to me on my Armored Heart back in October. Someone bought a print from me, but he paid me extra on top of that, and he's like, "I'd like to get a tattoo from this." I'm like, "Well, that's great. Go ahead, do it." And he asked for permission for that, and then he just paid. I didn't ask for money. I just was like, "Sure, go ahead." But he paid me extra for the tattoo, which I thought was very thoughtful of him. But it also makes me think, for other people out there, the 10 people who are listening to this, I don't know, like if you ever want to take an artist's piece of work and make a tattoo out of it, it would be in good faith to do something like that. Just so
How's that? I've not got any tattoos. I can't imagine myself getting a tattoo. I've known plenty of people who are into tattoos and the like.
So you were a bit dragging up your chest there, Andy.
Yeah.
I didn't want people to know. But I can't think of something that I would want permanently on my skin. I think that's the kind of that's my personal hurdle with tattoos. I have complete appreciation for people who are into it. I think there's some really awful tattoos. I think there's some amazing tattoo work out there. But as an artist who's created I mean, your Armored Heart was just. I'm trying to think of a suitable adjective. I wouldn't say I want to say divine, but divine's not quite right. But it's a beautiful image, and it's got such depth of meaning to it. So, as somebody who created that piece of art, how does it make you, as the artist, feel when somebody is actually taking that step of having your image permanently attached to their skin?
Well, I think that particular art piece for a lot of people was really meaningful, and it touched people in different ways. Like, it was meaningful for a lot of people, but maybe it hits people in different ways than, not everyone had the same, like, based on everyone's history and
back to subjective art again, aren't we?
Exactly. But I was really honored by that, and like, he was like, as soon as everything opens up, that's what I'm getting. And I was really excited, and I was really honored because to me, that's like one of the, like, it just felt, I was really,
it's a very good compliment.
Yeah, and it just feels like really meaningful to me. I don't know how to put it. Because that piece for me was very meaningful, and it came from a deep place from within me, and for that to resonate with a lot of people felt like a connection with a lot of people who I've never met in person before, and so that was like really special. Like, so there, there's been a few times in my life when my art has felt that meaningful, and that was like probably one of the highlights. Even though probably won't know this person or meet this person ever, I just thought it was like very exciting. So, and it was an honor, for sure.
I can imagine.
So, yeah, and so, but anyway, yeah.
I can only begin to imagine. I still find it bizarre when people either ask me to do something or buy something that I've made. I mean, I've not sold huge numbers of things, so for me it's still kind of amazing. And I can't. Having something on me, it would have to be something so special. Yeah, that's cool.
So anyway, I just thought that was really clever of her to do that, and I'm sure the other artists have done that before. She's probably not the first person, but I've really enjoyed her carvings. Like, she'll videotape herself carving, and it's just it's just very soothing to watch. It's very stress relieving and enjoyable to watch, because if you've ever carved through, especially like the easy carve kind of lino cut stuff, not like
the red pads.
Yeah, like, to me, that, like, getting that
it is so satisfying.
It's so satisfying, and then to watch her do it like very detailed. It's kind of like watching an engraver, someone who engraves silver or gold, or metal. It's almost like that, and it's so satisfying to watch. So anyway, I'll put her on there. But yeah, I love her work. It's beautiful, and her birds are amazing. And her she does tattooed ladies too. So maybe you get some ideas of the tattooed ladies, Andy.
Rosie the Riveter on your arm.
There you go. Cool.
Yeah, I love that. Did you see that Rosie the Riveter 3D thing that Adam Savage was involved in a few years ago?
No, I didn't.
It was essentially I can't remember if it was life size or even bigger than life size sculpture, 3-dimensional sculpture of Rosie the Riveter. It was 3D printed, but it was done in sections, and I can't remember if it was in hundreds or even thousands of people involved or parts involved, and then it was all kind of, so people were given a portion, they printed it, and then so it was patchwork, and then it was put together.
That's quite
I'll find a link to it. It is quite a while back. It's maybe 3 or 4 years, but it was, and this is one thing I love about the maker community, is the fact that it's such a community and so many people were involved and in taking on a project. Yeah, it was not dissimilar to the Apollo escape door that Adam did a couple of years ago as well, which again, that's just such a fantastic project, a collaboration on a scale that it's hardly ever known, and to actually then produce an object that people can go to. Is it Smithsonian it's in, I think?
Yes.
And you can go along and see it, and actually, if you want, all the files are there. You can, as several people did, 3D print your entire or machine. Because it wasn't just 3D printers. Machine your own escape door. It's just exciting when things like that happen.
Thing, though.
Yeah.
I love community-based projects like that. That really excites me. Haven't done that in a while. But
you are, I mean, almost going way back from attention. I mean, you are very actively involved in the community, particularly in Instagram. I mean, we talked about the Maker Chess set. You did the May movement for makers, which was that after May? Was that after May for Makers, or was it coincided with May for Makers?
It was coinciding with May for Makers. I just felt like it was a great time to do it. One, because the weather was warming up for a lot of people. And it just made sense to kind of do it at the same time because I felt like the community was a little bit more involved during that month because of May for Makers. So, and it was
you had a lot of people involved in that, if I remember rightly.
90 people, about 95 people involved in that, and I had 3 chat groups going on simultaneously, and it was a little wild, but I honestly was such good motivation for me to exercise, to get out there, to get moving, and I felt like it had a positive effect on my work, on my making work as well.
Cool.
And that was the whole point of it.
Yeah.
I mean, just to get moving. It wasn't like, okay, guys, you got to like bench this much weight every day and run 10 miles.
Yeah.
5 kilometers.
No, it was good. I mean, I was in one of those chat groups, and it was good seeing how kind of some of those relationships actually sort of developed amongst people, and kind of, it's still actually still extending today. Yeah, we've a few people that have been in the chat this evening. People that have got together because of that particular one, and I mean, you've been involved in quite a few of the kind of the auctions, the charity auctions that have taken place. So I mean, I just wanted to highlight if anyone didn't know, because if they've come across you, they really should. But you are one of the more active members of the community for community things.
Yes,
I think your name appears. There's something happens. Oh look, there's a Lindsay Creative piece of work that's going to be one of the prizes, or it's going to be one of the things that has been auctioned.
Well, it's something I really value was the community, because I kind of, so at our local makerspace, I had a community there for a while, but then it kind of dissolved. And working from home, working as an artist and a maker in your garage every day can be very lonely because you don't interact with coworkers. And so my coworkers are you guys on Instagram, the maker community specifically. I mean, not the 1,000 of people followers, but certain people I will interact with on a weekly, daily basis, giving each other advice. I'll be like, I think I asked Soph, I was like, have you been having issues mailing things to this country? And just things like that, where that's you would ask someone, your coworker.
So you do the water cooler or the photocopier, isn't it? It's that kind of
Exactly.
Oh, you've been doing such and such. Yeah, have you noticed that? Yeah.
And or just laughing at our issues, or I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily always be work related. It could be sending a meme, or just commiserating, and it's so nice to have that support system, and because you don't
people who understand properly as well.
I mean, my shop cat only does obviously she interrupts podcasts and
jump scares and
exactly, so she's not very helpful.
Any other things been sort of grabbing your attention? I think I
extended my time limit on that, but no, that was it. I'm pretty laser focused on a lot of things lately, so that was the only thing that really grabbed my attention this week, and it was needed. I needed something just to kind of chill out and zone out at, and it was so relaxing, and her artwork is just amazing. So, and it makes me want to get one of those printing roller dealies, whatever the roll name is.
I'm pretty certain you could just search for that.
My neighbor across the street, she's also an artist, and so, I mean, which is funny. I'll have my garage door open. She'll have her garage door open. We kind of wave to each other, and she's a printmaker, and so she's going to be building one of those roller print maker things. I don't know what it is, so I might help her out with that. I don't know, or she'll just buy one. We'll see.
It's a good excuse to make two, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Second one would be quicker. Yeah. And
Yeah.
possibly better.
I have seen a 3D printed version of those,
Yeah,
but it's very tiny.
Is that something you've done, 3D printing?
I have, so this is weird to say this, but I've never gone through the whole process of 3D printing. I know I'm like aware and knowledgeable of all the processes and the steps and the materials. I've given, I'll like get my thing off Thingiverse, and I'll be like, all right, and then send it off to my husband, he 3D prints a lot. So I'll be like, hey, this, just because I have a time limit on things, and that's me being efficient, honestly.
It's a rabbit hole. Yeah.
And lazy, honestly. Now, if I needed 3D printing, like if I do go down that casting route, I probably will eventually start 3D printing my own stuff, and do lost wax casting and things like that. We're getting in some 3D printers possibly at our makerspace to do that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Which will be exciting.
Yeah.
James from Molten Lake has been playing around with lost wax 3D print casting for jewelry as well. It's, very, very, very cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be. I mean, I guess that would be another project I could get into. But to me, like the idea of 3D printing isn't daunting. Does that make sense? Because I've done a lot of I've done all
the modeling and things as well.
Like I've done all the modeling, and I've done that I'm like, you can do it, no big deal.
Done that, moved on from that.
I don't know. And I know it's a huge thing in the maker community. I don't know. Maybe it's because if I start doing 3D modeling of my own stuff, like that's the thing, is like I want it to be of my own creations.
Yeah.
Then I could totally go down. I had another job doing 3D modeling for an oil company here, and I could spend all day doing that. But then I would not get any other work done. So
it is definitely a slippery slope.
It is, and I'm well aware of it. That's why.
And that's a good position to be in, being aware that it's slippery slope. It's I mean, for me and wood turning, I'd like to do wood turning, but I luckily have the restrictions of not enough space and not enough money, because I know it's when you start talking about there's the lathe, but you probably end up upgrading within most people I know who get started with a cheap lathe upgrade within a year or most 2 years. And then there's all the tools. There's different types of chisels for different types of things, and we're not just talking traditional and carbide. And then there's the chucks, and there's
and then you sharpen it as
got
well.
the whole the sharpening system, and then you're going to go into making your own resin parts, your own resin blanks, and stabilizing wood. So do you need a pressure pot, or do you need a vacuum chamber, or a bit of both? And
well, I mean, equally so with 3D printing, Andy. We dragged you into that, and then they've already doubled, and
Yes, I must do more of that too. Hopefully, when I get back from holiday, I'll get some time. We shall see. Jamie, what's been grabbing your attention?
Well, as we've discussed, food and fitness and stuff as well. I've not rediscovered, but I tend to sort of go through in fits and starts. Let a few videos build up for people, and then go and binge watch a load of them. And there's an absolute superhero in the competitive eating world, weirdly enough, called Leah Shutkiva, and she's from Birmingham, and she's hugely into fitness and hugely into food. Just some amazing cooking, but then also does competitive eating. So when you see like the Man versus Food challenges and things, she just turns up, absolutely demolishes every single record that's on the board, and then wanders off. She's got this weird quirk of her anatomy, I suppose, is that most of us, when our stomachs swell with food, they kind of swell forwards, and hers doesn't. Hers swells upwards into the kind of the rib cage. so she can cram in huge volumes of food and quite happily continue.
Wow.
So
So she doesn't
she's got-
suffocate.
well,
That's what I was
yeah,
thinking.
you're not far off there. But she's got her in the Guinness Book of Records. There's an entire page dedicated to her and her records,
Wow.
and it's just phenomenal. And for those sort of who know, like in the fitness community or strongman, I like stuff like strongman and things. So Eddie Hall is former world's strongest man. He's colossal, massive giant of a human being, and they collaborated on some videos together where they went and tackled it was man versus whale or some sort of sexist type man versus thing challenge. This massive fish and chip shop platter thing. Huge platter of this like shark and 6 kilos of potatoes sort of thing. And they both tackled it. And Eddie's, after about 25 minutes, he's about halfway through, managing to just cram a little bit more down and, really sort of struggling. And Leah's completely finished, sat, relaxing, cheering him on. And she's put down twice as much food as he is. It's just...
I think I may have seen one of those, and it's a fraction of the size. She's not...
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not kind of just a female Eddie Hall.
No, not
She's-
at all. She's normal human
An
size.
average-sized human female. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the videos I'm sharing is again an eating challenge that she's done. That is, it's her tackling the challenge and 3 guys also tackling the same challenge together. So it's one person against 3.
And then-
And yeah, not to spoil the video, but she absolutely demolishes the entire lot.
I think there may be a trend in the videos. I think there may be a trend in all her videos where...
Oh, completely. She holds the record for the eating an entire chocolate orange, including unwrapping it and then consuming the entire thing, and it's mind-boggling. It's in the same way that... Sorry, go on.
So how does she eat the orange? I'm really curious about this. Like, does she like smash it and then you have all the wedges and then you have to eat them like that, or does she just like cut it in half and then demolish
2 or 3 at a time and just
Okay.
put them. And the one I watched before, there was it was a triple. So there's like three big burgers that had 3 big patties in each. And then 3 tubs of tater tots, and again, just like it's mesmerizing to watch because it's so far outside of the norm that you'd see for any normal human. It's just mind blowing to me. So yeah, complete distortion of reality to see.
Yeah. I did a £4. I did a £4 steak when I was in my early 20s with trimmings and stuff, and I didn't eat for another 3 days after that. I think. Yeah, that's just can't be doing with that.
Yesterday I had onion rings, like the fried onion rings, like as an appetizer. I was like, oh, let's have some onion rings with our lunch, and I think after eating like maybe 4 or 5 onion rings and then like my actually meal comes, I think I had like 2 bites of my meal and I'm like, I'm full. Like it's just like just the idea of eating tater tots and like having room after that, like, oh man.
Well, this is like three massive burgers and then 3 buckets of these. And then, she had about half of one of them left, and she was aiming for, it was a half an hour challenge. And she was aiming to do it in 15 minutes. And this also hadn't ever been done before either. So it was an uncompleted challenge. And she's there with a guy who's very into bodybuilding. And they'd just done a big back workout together on his channel, and so the pair of them both sort of turned up very hungry. And she had like half a tub of these things left after eating 2.5 of them, and then eating the 3 burgers before that. And she's sort of looking at the time, and the guy said, I thought you were going for 15 minutes. oh, how long have I got left? It's like, oh, 35 seconds. So she's then just like grabbing 2 at a time and just. Again, it's just, and she's explaining throughout the video that like what she's doing is so far outside the norm. There's discussions on her channel where she's been and seen medical professionals and stuff like that, and like her anatomy is incredibly well suited to what she's doing, which to me it's just like Eddie Hall being doing deadlifting 500 kilos or things like that, being the very extremes of what the human body is sort of capable. Like we were talking before about the biomedical engineering and that kind of thing. That fascinates me as to what we're capable of as a species.
Something also, because I was brought up on kind of the World's Strongest Man at Christmas. It was a classic thing to sit down, mostly with my dad, and we'd sit and watch World's Strongest Man. It was every Christmas. We'd always do that, and we enjoyed watching it. And
is that like
I always kind of wondered.
I don't understand. What is the World's Strongest Man?
World's Strongest Man. Essentially, it's a competition where. People from all around the world. They'd be countrywide competitions first of all, and their best person from every country would then go and compete. Usually somewhere hot, be south of France or Jamaica or somewhere. It'd be kind of a really nice place, and it'd be all sorts of different strongman activities. So it might be
pulling a truck or
pulling a truck. You've got a thick rope. You've got to pull a truck 30 meters across a line, or you've got to hold 2 really heavy axes, like 100-pound axes, arm's length out, and
carrying a stone back and forth on a relay course. The stone that's like a tombstone type thing, or huge amounts of mass that they're
odd shapes often. Or how many times can you deadlift a car? So they'd have a car, and they'd have it emptied out of they'd cut the bottom out, so it's just a hollow shell. They'd then balance it to make sure that it was not always necessarily well balanced, but it'd be balanced. They'd reinforce it maybe with a bar, and they'd literally stand in the middle of it, and how many times can you squat it or deadlift it? So it's just extremes of strength. Sometimes with kind of cardiovascular input as well. They're literally racing each other. How far can you carry 400 pounds of lead or sacks of grain?
These guys they average somewhere between 350 and 400 pounds each that they weigh. They're all somewhere usually between sort of 6 foot and 6'10".
So part giant.
They're just like the absolute extreme top end of what the human body is capable of.
But the thing I always kind of used to question, and those are the people who chose to take part or found out about this competition and therefore started training for it and took part. And I kind of used to sort of wonder whether there's some farmer in the Ukraine or in Argentina who's maybe has never seen a TV, has certainly never watched a program like that, would never know that there's a sport that involves it, who would just kind of walk in, have done no training, and just beat everyone hands down.
Moves horses for a living. That's something.
And and there's a kind of something. There was a program years ago on the BBC. I think it was BBC. Might have been ITV, but British TV, which I think was called something like Faking It. And they took a bunch of people and they literally kind of ran them through a bunch of tests to see what they might be good at. And there was physical tests and mental tests, and then they would they identify what they might be good at and then train them to see if they could then potentially compete or convince other people that they were actually maybe seasoned professionals. So they found a woman, for example, who had really good balance. She had a great power to weight ratio, perfect for climbing. So they basically taught her basics of climbing, and she then took part in a climbing competition and did well.
That's amazing.
And in fact, she went on to become a climber for I'm not sure she went
Fantastic.
professional climber, but it became a major hobby for her. Somebody else was taught how to languages. They came a crash course in a language, or a bunch of languages, and he's actually gone on to do well in those languages. Horse riding or conducting an orchestra, and these people were then kind of like other people going, well, they've obviously been doing it for a long time. They're obviously been brought up doing this thing, and no, it's just they've been identified as having that talent. Of that ability to do it, and then we've just given them the right push in the right direction. And I almost wish we had that. Almost, almost like you said when you were in school, you had the kind of somebody went, have a look at this and answer these questions, and we can identify what might be quite a good start for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we do necessarily enough of that to kind of put people on the kind of saying, well, actually, you might be. I mean, like I said, I was rubbish at sports at school. I was football, rugby, anything like that. Running, never any good at all. When I discovered it, I used to be, I'm not now, but I used to be a pretty good climber. And perhaps if I'd maybe started a bit earlier, maybe had the right training, I could even maybe a very good, I wouldn't be world class, but a good climber, because that suited me. And it'd be nice maybe if more people could get things like that.
It's opportunity and viewing the world, isn't it? Again, it's. But what's been taking your attention this week, Andy?
Me?
Other than holiday.
No. Yeah, as I said last week, I brought some electronic stuff with me. I haven't actually picked that up yet. I've only got a day and a bit left. So whether I'll get a chance tomorrow, I'm going to have a rest day tomorrow, so I may get a chance to do a bit of that tomorrow. Might also do the podcast. Earlier in the week, we went to in the town we're staying at, had their annual agricultural show. So we popped along there for the day, and that was actually really quite good. I mean, there's lots of animals, all sorts of. There was some pretty much orange sheep, some giant cows, horses that were as small as our dog. It's just different breeds, heritage breeds. The horses that were smaller than our dog, and we don't have a big dog. It's just fascinating that. But quite a good bunch of makers as well. Blacksmith there working. Not as good as some of the blacksmiths we know, I think. But they were making. There was a wheelwright and a few other people, and some vintage cars. I spent ages talking to one guy. There was a car that I didn't recognise, and I was like, I spent ages talking to him, and it turned out it was a kit car. So essentially, it was a Volkswagen Beetle that didn't look anything like a Volkswagen Beetle. It looked like something kind of It was open top, kind of. It looked kind of the sort of thing you might expect Dick Tracy to jump out of a car in the kind of 1930s. Lots of sweeping angles, and it was just really nice. And talking to people like that about kind of essentially making. They're just just a different part of the maker community. I'd say perhaps quite devolved from our part, but that was one thing. The other thing that caught my attention this week, and a bit of a sad one really, I suspect quite a few people listening may know this. Jimmy DiResta put up a post earlier in the week about the passing of his shop manager, Aaron, which was quite sudden. He'd been in hospital for a back surgery, and the surgery went okay, but a few days afterwards, Aaron collapsed and died. And making it this last week was tough to listen to. It was tough to listen to, and it's. I don't want to say it's nice to hear, because it's not nice to hear about people dying and people losing friends and colleagues. I'd say more than colleagues, but actually it's good that people are able to essentially, and men particularly, able to sort of share their emotions and actually stand up and say, look, I'm really sad about this thing that has happened, and I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to, for too long, people have kind of, when something bad happens, particularly something like a death, and a sudden death, people hide it. And it's good that that's not the case, but it is a sad situation. Aaron wasn't somebody that I followed him on Instagram, and I'd liked some of his posts, but I'd not had any sort of interaction with him. He wasn't he didn't interact with huge numbers of people. And if you listen to Making It, you'll know why. He was very focused on what he wanted to do. And building a big social media following was not part of that focus. I think it's a difficult episode to listen to, but I think actually there's a lot to learn from it as an episode about what Aaron was as a person, how he was, and how there's a lot to learn from that. About maybe more of us should develop some of that focus on things and not necessarily spend so much time on social media as just a way of escaping, which many of us do. And then kind of say, there's other things we're not getting done. So it's a loss to the community. We've had a few this last year. We've talked about in the past, people like Sharon, and there was Jesse who worked on Mythbusters, and there's been others too that I know of. But it hit home hard for me, and it may not be something that everyone wants to go and listen to, that episode, and I know that some people may find it too difficult. But if you think you can, maybe give it a listen. Even if you're not a regular listener to Making It or whatever, it's a good one to hear. A sad one, but it gave pause for thought. So that's been it for him this week. We've been on holiday, we've been out and about, we've been seeing friends and relatives, and so not huge amounts of making. Still managed to get my drawing done every day, which is still for me, it's still something I'm determined to do.
I'm really impressed that you do that every day. A long time ago, I tried drawing every day, and it's a really difficult habit to get started and to stick with. So I'm just
it's been tricky at times. I think the reason that there's been days when I've kind of thought, I mean, in some way, actually today we had a bit of a long day. We were meant to meet up with some relatives, but one of their children was sick, and so we travelled to kind of where we were going to meet and have a picnic together. And we got there and checked the phone. And, sorry, we're not going to be able to make it. And I was like, so went for a bit of a walk instead. And we made a good day of it. We just didn't get to meet the people we wanted to meet, and it was kind of like sort of driving back, long drive back, and we went for another walk on part way back, and it's just like bit me just thought, nah, I don't really fancy doing it today. But I've made a commitment to Rob, and said, look, I'm going to do this every day. If you do it every day, I'm going to do it every day. So, for me, it would be it's the community again. Without the community, if I just set myself the challenge of doing it, I'd have given up a long time ago.
Yeah, definitely.
And
sometimes I'll say something like, I'm going to do this, and I'll say it on my stories so that I'm held accountable to
hold yourself accountable.
That particular thing. So the whole going back to the silver night thing, I'm like, oh no, I said I was going to make the night out of silver, but it had been like a month since I had done anything, and so I'm like, maybe people forgot.
But
I mean, now it's out on the podcast.
Yeah, it's okay.
But
I mean,
that's
just what it is. That happens.
But the deadline is looming. It's more important to meet the deadline for that collaboration,
totally.
I think, than maybe get the exact material.
Exactly. It was, and well, not just to meet a deadline, but to make something I was happy with and that I felt proud of, even if I wasn't getting paid for it. And I'm sorry, I'm not getting paid for it. And this money is just to raise money for this thing. I mean, still, I want it to be a good thing. I want to be happy with it. I want whoever wins it to be satisfied holding it. So anyway, sorry, going back to your art, I think holding each other accountable for that kind of stuff, our minds, tell us that in a lot of ways, like to, that motivation there.
It's part
to
of what
do
guilt is a function, isn't it? It's that,
Yeah, but it's a good one. It's not hopefully it's a good thing, not a bad thing.
well, that's for me. It's that avoidance of guilt, then, isn't it? To
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I'll do that thing because I don't want to feel horrible at not doing the thing.
Well, as humans, we try to avoid pain, don't we? And
Yeah.
so we balance off which is more painful, the not looking good in front of a bunch of people, the community, or not producing something, or producing. It's.
I think we've got over that with
it's
this
balancing
podcast
off.
now, haven't we?
Yeah. Talking of which, I think we've now gone into the lead with. I think we've beaten.
Yeah, we have.
Rob's by about 9 minutes. So
See, I told
well done.
you guys that I didn't want to beat his record.
But it's just happened. We were aiming for it.
I purposely said
Yeah.
like I don't want to. I wasn't aiming for anything. I said I don't want to beat Prickly Sauce's record. He can have it totally. Like I won't have enough things to talk about for that long.
But I mean,
It's interesting. The two
say you were gonna waffle.
people who said I have nothing to talk about have got the two longest.
Food for thought.
Yeah. I don't know.
But we're approaching with 2 hours and 50 minutes. It's been a fantastic chat.
It has.
We've really enjoyed talking to you, Lindsay. We appreciate you giving up your afternoon.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I had a really great. I mean, I enjoy talking to you guys. I don't know if people like listening in on it. Maybe they all fell asleep. So,
Well,
there's been lots of
the numbers have gone down, but it's not
Yeah.
not. It's understandable, and then many people who've left the chat have said, "Well, I'll catch up with the podcast when it gets released." And it is. Yeah, it's gone midnight here in the UK and in Europe, so completely understand that people aren't necessarily listening live.
totally.
One of the things that sort of Jamie and I have kind of said, particularly behind the scenes, is that if nobody watches, we don't actually care. We love the people who are getting something from the chat, but we're having great chats with some great makers and people that we consider friends, and
I
for
totally
us,
agree.
that's as important as anything else. So if we get an audience of 3, that's fine. If we get an audience of 33, that's even better. If we get an audience of 3,000, it's fine. But the important thing, the really important thing for us, is that we've had an enjoyable chat.
Totally.
And we kind of describe the podcast as kind of sitting down with some friends with a drink in a pub and just shooting the breeze. And
pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much, Lindsay.
Yeah.
And
we look forward to having you back.
Best find you though.
I am on Instagram at Lindsay_creative, and that's pretty much where you can find me. That's about
And
it.
hopefully in a few weeks' time. Well, how many weeks time?
8 weeks' time.
8 weeks' time.
Episode 20.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'll be
we'll be
fun.
back for another chat, and that'll be for us, for Jamie and I, it's going to be mostly a listen and maybe ask the occasional question,
And lots of taking notes, I feel.
Yes. That's going to be good because having that kind of bigger conversations every sort of 20 episodes with a group of people, that's going to be. I think at times it'll be challenging. But it's going to be hopefully informative and interesting and good to do. So your details are already in the show notes for Instagram, and later in the week the rest we'll get maybe even tomorrow, because if I'm having a rest day, depends whether anyone else is having a rest day as well before we travel on Tuesday.
Having a rest day, do some work, Andy.
Yeah. But certainly by the end of Wednesday UK time, the audio podcast will be up, and the show notes will be there in detail for people to peruse and find the bits they want. And next week we've got Caro, if I remember correctly. So Karoline Hinz from. That's going to be another great chat, I think.
Yes,
she's amazing.
But she's an hour ahead of us, so it'll be that a little bit later. So
might be a slightly shorter one.
Yes.
Just to give her a
Yes,
chance
because
to sleep.
no doubt she'll have work the next day, and
Yeah. See, that's the
a bit
problem.
trickier.
Anyone who's ahead of you, they have, or behind you guys, we just
Yeah,
have way
less
too
sleep
much
time.
energy. We could just talk forever. But
That's
I
right.
will
Me and Andy
be,
don't sleep anyway, so that's why we're still going at this point.
but I'll be like prickly sauce, where he said like he gets exhausted after having conversations like this. So that'll be me later tonight. I'll be wiped. So. And maybe
Well,
the next day too.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be worth it, and hopefully haven't tied you out too much.
No, it's fine.
But
It'll
cool.
be good.
It's-
I
it is
purposely
pretty
didn't talk to
tricky,
anybody
tricky.
else today. Just kidding. I'm saving my energy. I do that actually sometimes. I don't-
Yep.
I have to
Yeah, good
really
approach to
take care of my resources.
Well, it's self care, isn't it?
Mhm.
Making sure that you have enough spoons left to deal with people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think I will hit the end broadcast
On
button.
that note,
Okay, guys.
So
Good talking with you.
good night. Yeah, good night. All good night. Those that are still hanging out. There's a few still hanging out in the live
Yeah,
chat.
little hobby
thank you
shop
for
that-
hanging in there.
Hanging in here like it's like a horrible thing. I'm hanging in. Okay, guys, bye-bye.
Bye bye then, folks.
good night, guys.